Good morning. This is the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. It is Wednesday, August 26th. This is our general meeting. We start with a roll call.
Thank you. Commissioner Ackerman,
Here.
Commissioner Cross,
Present.
Commissioner Mesner,
Here.
Commissioner Oath,
Here.
Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 commissioners present.
Great. Good to see everybody. Good to be back. I took a little time with my family. Good to be back and ready for a hearing. Next is commissioner comments. Do commissioners have comments? Next is general public comment. Mr. Thomas, I believe we have 5 members of the public that are signed up for public comment.
That's correct, and we'll begin elevating them now.
First on the agenda is Heidi Leithwood. Good morning.
Good morning, commissioners. I had a permission to go longer than the usual public comment time period because I'll be reading a letter from 12 signatories. I just wanted to confirm that before I get started. It's a 4-page letter.
Yeah, commissioners, Ms. Leithwood had reached out to hearings manager Thomas and I this yesterday. She's got a letter that she wants to read into the record. I use my discretion to provide her with the additional whatever amount of time is necessary to read the letter into the record. And so, unless there's a disagreement with that, Ms. Leithwood, please go ahead and read your letter into the record. We would also obviously appreciate getting a written version of that emailed to the ECMC so that we've got that for our viewing pleasure.
Thank you very much. And yes, you should be receiving the written letter shortly. I want to start with reading the groups who are signed on to this letter in alphabetical order. 350 Colorado, Black Parents United Foundation, Broomfield Health and Safety First, Citizens for a Healthy Community, Colorado Coalition for a Livable Climate, Erie Protectors, Grand Valley Citizens Alliance, Larimer Alliance, Physicians for Social Responsibility Colorado, Save the Aurora Reservoir, Sierra Club, and the Greenhouse Connection Center. And it's regarding West Slope Community Impact Tour cancellation. Dear Chair Robbins, Commissioners, and Director Walker-Graf, the undersigned groups hereinafter community-based organizations, or CBO, as signatories to the July 7th, 2025 letter regarding community and environmental justice engagement, are deeply troubled by the final and unilateral decision by Jeff Robbins, Commission Chair, to cancel the North Fork Valley portion of the West Slope Community Impact Tour, which led to cancellation of the entire West Slope Tour. He communicated his last-minute decision via phone on July 28, 2026, for what would have been the first ECMC co-hosted Community Impact Tour, planned for August 5th and 6th, 2026. This tour was the result of 6 years of advocacy, part of a broader ECMC commitment, and underwent 6 months of extensive planning. We appreciate and applaud the dedication of the Community Relations Unit and the collaboration that went into planning a long overdue, informative experience for commissioners, ECMC staff, and community members. However, Chair Robbins suddenly breached ECMC community engagement commitments and acted in contravention of ECMC's environmental justice principles and potentially the open meetings law. The Commission has the opportunity to repair the damage inflicted and chart a path forward. It will require accountability, the establishment of governance measures, and internal and external assurances. While rebuilding trust will take time, it would be irresponsible to squander the sunk costs already invested by community and staff in preparation for the historic tour. Background on ECMC commitments to the CBOs. Commissioners and staff interface regularly with operators. Commissioners attend regular operator tours to understand oil and gas operations, but have never attended a community impact tour to understand the impacts of oil and gas operations on communities. Staff also holds monthly operator meetings and just started holding regular community informational meetings in March 2026 as part of ECMC's CBO commitments. CBOs and ECMC community liaisons have been working together for over a year to address the disparity in commissioner and staff engagement. On July 7th, 2025, we sent a letter to Commissioners, Director Murphy, and the Community Relations Unit, CRU team that kicked off a years-long collaboration between the CRU and the undersigned CBOs. The July 7th letter stated that to build trust and set the appropriate expectations, the ECMC needs the appropriate tools to put the protected community on the same level as the regulated community. To achieve this parity goal, several recommendations were made to amend the EJ Engagement Implementation Plan, including community impact tours designed by community to increase commissioner and staff engagement with impacted communities. In response to the July 7th letter, the Community Relations Unit organized a meeting with the CBOs on August 26, 2025, which was attended by Deputy Policy Director Lauren Mercer-Gelman and Commissioner Tricia Oath. On September 3rd, 2025, Commissioner Oath updated commissioners in a public meeting and commended the level of collaboration and open communication between the Community Relations team and CBOs, along with mutual goals and solutions-based approach. On September 10th, 2025, CRU delivered ECMC's agreed-upon commitments with respect to recommendations made in the July 7th letter, including a commitment to conducting community impact tours, which was acknowledged to be long overdue. CRU and representatives of the CBOs established monthly meetings to discuss the status of these commitments. Community Impact Tour implementation. Grand Valley Citizens Alliance and Citizens for a Healthy Community had worked with CRU for 6 months to develop a comprehensive 2-day community impact tour for the Western Slope that exemplified the concerns of impacted communities in the Rifle-Garfield County area and the North Fork Valley. The purpose of the tour was for commissioners and staff to experience cumulative impacts from the community perspective, and specifically the water, geological hazard, air quality, GHG emissions, and local warming impacts through aerial and ground tours and panel discussions with community members. In November 2025, CRU informed us that ECMC would be able to commit to 2 community impact tours in 2026, and on February 18th, 2026, informed us that the budget was secured for the 2 tours, one on the Western Slope and one on the Front Range. The tours were originally to be completed in June before the end of the 2026 fiscal year. Due to leadership changes within CRU in early April, the tours were pushed out to after June 2026 and into the next fiscal year. Nonetheless, as stated in an April 29th, 2026 email, CRU secured assurance from the ECMC finance manager that pushing the tours into the next fiscal year would not impact the budget allocation. Once we had the budgetary confirmation, we moved full steam ahead in planning the first community impact tour for the Western Slope in August. The hearings unit worked with commissioners to schedule time on their calendars, and the tour dates were confirmed on May 8th, 2026. CRU updated commissioners periodically on the tour, and the West Slope Community Impact Tour was officially noticed on the ECMC Hearings and Community Relations web pages on July 7th, 2026. In addition, at the July 8th, 2026 Commissioner meeting, Commissioner Oath enthusiastically announced, as she stated, primarily for the benefit of the public since commissioners were aware of the tour, that the first Community Impact Tour was taking place on the Western Slope the first week in August and would replace the commission meeting that week. Breach of commitment. The community liaison position is the result of the 2021 Environmental Justice Act, 2022 EJ Task Force recommendations on community engagement, and SB 24229. Notably, the EJ Task Force was dominated by industry and recommended actions for meaningful engagement with communities. Pursuant to Rule 224C, the community liaison serves as the intermediary between commissioners, ECMC staff, and community to elevate community voices and implement such projects as the Community Impact Tour. We respected this role and responsibility and worked directly with CRU. Community liaison Stephen Arauza updated the commission on June 24th in a public meeting on the CRU's work and progress with the CBOs, including the Community Impact Tours. We worked in good faith with CRU in alignment with ECMC's environmental justice principles and environmental justice best practices and held regular planning meetings. On July 27th, 2026, 1 week before the scheduled tour, a closed-door unilateral decision was made by one commissioner, albeit the chair, to cancel the North Fork Valley portion of the tour, ostensibly due to budget constraints. The official cancellation notice stated, "Due to scheduling and operational constraints, the ECMC has made the difficult decision to cancel the upcoming tour dates. We recognize that community members and partner organizations set aside valuable time to participate, and we sincerely apologize for the inconvenience. ECMC remains committed to engaging with energy-impacted communities across Colorado, and we are reassessing how best to organize future outreach opportunities, given current staff capacity and state budget limitations." The final decision was communicated to CBOs on July 28, 2026, at which time Chair Robbins also claimed that the chair and commissioners were unaware of the tour until a few days earlier. In lieu of the full-day North Fork tour, the chair offered to squeeze a 1-hour portion of the North Fork tour into an already full rifle agenda to be held not in the community but 2 hours away across a mountain pass, eliminating the opportunity for on-site observation. Notably, in coming to the decision to cancel the tour, no consultation occurred with CRU or the communities involved in organizing the tour. More disturbingly, the chair's decision to cancel was not made in a public meeting and appears to be the result of chained meetings with commissioners to reverse an approved action, potentially in violation of open meetings laws. Conclusion: the cancellation decision and the manner in which it was handled breached trust, disrespected and disregarded months of organizing on the part of the community relations team and the CBOs, and discredits the ECMC's community engagement program. ECMC staff cannot build trust and make progress on community engagement commitments if one commissioner can undo all the collaborative work in a unilateral last-minute decision. We recognize that the Commission experienced staff leadership transition challenges over the last several months, and most recently, the week before the scheduled tour. Nonetheless, the first rule of community engagement and environmental justice engagement is trust and transparency, and that begins and ends with honoring commitments made. We believe community impact tours are a critical component of informed decision-making and expect the Commission to follow through on its commitment. To chart a path forward, we suggest starting with the establishment of governance measures to give the Community Relations Unit and CBOs assurance that months of approved collaborative action cannot be arbitrarily upended by the chair of the Commission. 2, ensure all internal procedures are aligned with ECMC's environmental justice and community engagement principles. And 3, engage community and CRU in rescheduling the West Slope Tour. Respectfully, the 12 organizations that I referenced before reading the letter. And thank you again very much for allowing this extra time to read the letter. We will be sending it shortly.
Thank you, Ms. Leithwood. We look forward to receiving the letter. I believe there's a few other folks that are going to speak to the same topic, so I'll reserve response until we hear from everyone. I want to give everybody a chance to speak to us about this matter. Next up is Sandra Dugan from 350 Colorado.
Hello. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
First, I want to take a moment to acknowledge something that we all know but seldom address directly. This Energy and Carbon Management Commission still mostly weighs in favor of the oil and gas industry, despite the changes outlined in SB 19181. As you know, the law mandates that this commission put public health, safety, and the environment ahead of oil and gas growth. However, since 2021, over 70 locations, many with dozens of wells, have been approved closer than the 2,000-foot setback to homes due to off-ramps in the rules. This is in no way protective of Coloradans or our environment. The Commission has the opportunity to learn about the communities that they are failing to protect by participating in community impact tours. Unfortunately, for reasons that are still unclear, Jeff Robbins recently chose not to fulfill his commitment to fully participate in the West Slope Community Impact Tour. This last-minute decision reaffirmed that this commission is not operating in a manner that prioritizes the communities most impacted by oil and gas operations in our state. What would have been the first ECMC co-hosted community impact tour was the result of years of advocacy and months of extensive planning in partnership with the ECMC's own Community Relations Unit. If you are to change the culture of this commission to one that honors SB 19181, you need to prioritize upholding your commitments to community-based organizations. Not doing so risks further damaging the fragile relationship between this regulatory body and the community which it aims to protect. For starters, we must adequately fund and reschedule the West Slope Community Tour. Furthermore, to even the playing field, this tour and future community impact tours ought to be prioritized over operator tours. Now, as the ECMC undergoes leadership changes, it is more important than ever that this commission act in accordance with the commitments made to the community, a community which is suffering the real-life impacts of our rapidly changing climate fueled by fossil fuel corporations that operate in Colorado. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Louis Vanderkool. Broomfield Health and Safety First.
Yes, Lois Vander Kooi, not cool.
Sorry about that.
Broomfield.
Trying my best to get names pronounced correctly.
I'm part of the Neighbor to Neighbor group and have been observing state policies and actions since 2017, when extraction oil and gas came to Broomfield neighborhoods. When Chair Robbins recently canceled half of the West Slope tour, I felt a familiar sorrow, frustration, disgust, and despair, heightened also by the federal ignorance, greed, and aggression currently operating. I knew how much planning and work had gone into the tour and how well motivated the participants were in welcoming and informing you. It is urgent that we address the adverse effects of the industry and global warming. The ranchers, farmers, and ski industry of the mountain areas are suffering with our crises of drought, fires, floods, food shortages, ozone and particulate matter, and heat. And the industries profiting from mineral extraction have a great deal of power and money to influence you, public opinion, and politics. When I was on Broomfield's Oil and Gas Committee in 2017, we negotiated with extraction to gain better protections than the state provided. Extraction took us on 2 tours, one to the Stromberger pad to show the quietness and sophistication of their operations, the other to the Greeley pad near Dawn Stein, where they had erected a flimsy wall between her house and a road leading to the pad. Extraction representatives were charming and reassuring, but were also heard threatening, "We'll sue you," during negotiations. The Stromberger pad exploded that winter and could have killed people. I heard John later eliciting the sympathy of Chair Robbins during a hearing after Senate Bill 19181 passed. So please, with your eyes, ears, and discernment, be more genuinely open in considering adverse impacts. And please have compassion in addressing these matters as rulemakers and regulators. It is a matter of truly caring rather than saying, we can't do more, our rules are sufficient, we don't have the staff or resources, there needs to be more studies. We're giving you a voice, so stop complaining. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. We now will hear from Leslie Robinson, Grand Valley Citizens Alliance.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Many of you have attended the Energy Expo in Garfield County over the past years, where I have managed to corner most of you for perhaps a few minutes in the hallway as I elbowed my way through all the oil and gas people. There's no time to chat except to note I'm still alive, representing the environmental community here in Western Garfield County to counterbalance the drill baby drill ideology of the Garfield County commissioners. So I was very excited and prepared for your visit to Rifle as a kickoff to your cumulative impact tour plans, and then became very disappointed that it was a lost opportunity for you to learn more about how oil and gas development affects our air, water, and environment and our local communities here. Plus, the contrast between our 17,000 wells saturating the Colorado River Valley in comparison to the few in the North Fork is substantial to view in an airplane thousands of feet above. However, there is one subject that cannot wait for the rescheduling of our community tours, and that's calling the alarm to the severity of our drought here on the Western Slope. We are at an environmental tipping point when it comes to the drought's cumulative impacts upon our water resources. The Upper Colorado River Commission predicted users have seen less than 40% of their water rights this year. Every new well or OGDP approved in our area means someone downstream could be severely impacted. Your decisions have repercussions here when it comes to the future of water availability for everyone, to the point where we might have to decide between oil or water in the future of Colorado. As mentioned before, this was a missed opportunity for you as there is no substitute for on-site visits and observations through our eyes. The annual cumulative impacts report is simply not an indicator of what's happening on the ground in Western Garfield County today. Thank you again for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson, for being with us. We now will hear from Natasha Leger, Citizens for a Healthy Community.
Good morning, Commissioners. I wanted to take the opportunity to remind you that SB 181 imposed a dual statutory mandate on the Commission to regulate oil and gas operations and protect public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife. This created two communities, the regulated community and the protected community. Interacting with and understanding both communities is mission critical. After the mission change rules, Commissioner Messner kicked off operator tours to educate commissioners on the operations they are responsible for permitting and regulating. This made sense. How else are you supposed to understand the operator perspective? Ironically, I believe that the first operator tour was on the Western Slope in November 2021. That educational goal is what sparked our advocacy for community impact tours. Yet, when we asked the commissioners to tour communities to understand the impacts of oil and gas operations beyond the well pad, we were offered one-way listening session. That was that there was no need for on-site observation depriving the protected community of an important tool in the regulatory process. Fast forward to the present. Needless to say, you can imagine how upset we were when the first community impact tour was suddenly canceled. We understand that circumstances can change due to shifting legislative and regulatory priorities, resource constraints, emergencies, or operational and technical difficulties. If the reason for canceling the tour was truly budgetary, then some options should have been presented to see how we could work within those constraints. The only option apparently unilaterally considered was to pick one community over another. With all the commissioners and a number of staff scheduled to participate, another option could have been to consider one or two less commissioners, one or two less staff, as lodging and travel were the biggest expense. While we would have liked all commissioners to attend, that would have been a more elegant solution to the perceived problem. A joint solution, one in which community and the community relations team were involved, would have been welcomed. If the commission truly valued community and community input, we wouldn't be here today having this conversation. Instead, we would be celebrating the first community impact tour and elevating the protected community into the regulatory process. We urge you to review the letter that Heidi just read in the spirit that it was sent. As a constructive recount of the ECMC commitments, the extensive collaborative planning that took place, and the failure, internal and external, to uphold ECMC's commitment to meaningful community engagement, which once again sidelined the protected community. Please use this letter to establish measures that will prevent this failure from happening again. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Mr. Thomas, that's everyone on my list. Is that accurate?
Yes, excuse me, that concludes public comment for today.
Okay. I think it's appropriate for a bit of a response to the group since they took time to come to speak to us today. And so I will do that. Hold on just a second. So I want to briefly address the concerns brought to us this morning and the community of impact tours that have been planned for the West Slope and that were recently canceled. We recognize that community organizations, residents, and others invested significant time and resources in preparing for these visits, and we regret the disruption, the disappointment caused by the change in plans. We value the opportunity to hear directly from communities about their experiences with communities that have actual or potential energy development and the issues that affect them. At the same time, it is important that commission-sponsored tours are designed consistently and in a way that is directly connected to ECMC's responsibilities under Colorado law. As I reviewed the planned West Slope tour, we determined that we needed to adjust the agenda to make sure the locations, topics, and structure of these visits were relevant to and appropriately reflected the Commission's regulatory role, and that it ensured that any tours could serve as a model for similar engagement in energy-impacted communities across the state. When ECMC presented these adjustments to the community organizations involved in the planned tour, the organizations requested that the tour be canceled. ECMC is operating under new budgetary constraints that emerged between the inception of the West Slope tour and its execution. When the legislature eliminated $5 million of ECMC severance tax revenue, we were forced to take an even closer look at our expenditures to make sure they align with ECMC's mission and regulatory authority. Our intention is not to step away from this engagement. Our intention is to do it well and in line with our regulatory mission. We remain committed to rescheduling community-impacted tours for those communities impacted by actual or potential energy development, and to developing an approach that provides meaningful opportunities for energy-impacted communities or potential energy-impacted communities to share their perspectives while ensuring that the Commission's time and resources are focused on matters relevant to and within ECMC's authority. We also want these opportunities to be equitable so that energy impacted communities or potentially energy impacted communities in different parts of Colorado have equally meaningful opportunities to participate. We appreciate the patience of those who plan to participate in the West Slope Tour, and we look forward to continuing this conversation as we develop the next rounds of visits. It wasn't an opportunity to pick one community over another. They're two distinct communities. Upon looking at the agenda, there was recognition that many parts of the Paonia part of the agenda, including a 4x4 tour of the Terrar Ditch, were not relevant to ECMC's regulatory mission. The Terrar Ditch is not something that is within our regulation. Its environmental impacts are not something that we regulate. And a use of public funds to tour that ditch would have not been wise and respectful of state funds. I also would note to Ms. Robinson, and she and I have a long relationship, that the 2019 URSA APAD that was approved in January of 2019 actually is the pad that precipitated my coming to commission and seeking change. I would note that we took immediate protective actions as best we could, and then we passed 181. And since then, I've not identified another comparable new Battlement Mesa development approval since the BMC APAD in 2019. With all that said, we are looking forward to working on several of the suggestions made this morning. Our staff is working on standard operating procedures, governing community tours. Our staff is working on governance measures. Our staff is working on ensuring that our internal procedures are in line with EJ principles and procedures. And I appreciate the recognition that there has been a lot of change within the community relations unit, change within leadership, change within director. We're working hard to facilitate moving forward in a manner that is in concert with what we heard this morning. We also look forward to reviewing the letter that is being sent to us and that was read into the record by Ms. Leithwood this morning as we develop consistent measures going forward. I want to thank all 5 members of the community that came to us this morning for their thoughtful comments, and we look forward to continued engagement in line with the statements I've made and with the work that the Community Relations Unit is doing. And in closing, I would point out that it's a little concerning that the state agency that has the most transparent and the most involvement with community liaisons and with communities of any other state agency in Colorado, which means pretty much any other state agency within the nation, that our efforts, which are singular and unique and are being developed as best we can, are derided and decried and looked upon as not being well done. We're doing the best we can. And again, I sincerely apologize for the cancellation. We're working forward to renewing these efforts in a manner consistent with standard operating procedures and governance documents. So those are my responses. I welcome any of the 5 of you or others to sit down with me individually. Happy to continue to discuss, and we look forward to those discussions. Any other commissioners have any comments at this point? Commissioner Messner?
Thanks for the comments, Chair Robbins, and appreciate the thoughts of the 5 folks that shared this morning. So I think it's important to give a little perspective, my perspective on this, and what I was hoping to see out of these community impact tours. I didn't hear about the agenda until very close to the time of the tours themselves. I'm the one commissioner who actually has lived and worked in the general area that some of these tours were being contemplated in. And, uh, you know, as was indicated by one of the public commenters, when I first became a professional commissioner, I encouraged the commission to go take a tour of the Western Slope, including the area that was being contemplated for this particular tour. It wasn't just an operator tour, and I think every single opportunity we've had to engage on the Western Slope and the Front Range for that matter has included both opportunities to look at sites that are regulated by the commission, which makes complete sense as these are important to get perspective of the landscape and the potential impacts associated with the operations that we regulate, but also incorporated opportunities for community engagement and public comment as part of each of those tours. And so in 2021, when I organized a West Slope tour that included a much broader region than what this community impacted tour contemplated, it did include, you know, looking at things in the North Fork of the Gunnison area from an oil and gas site location, because without looking at the site, without looking at those locations, it's really difficult to discern what the potential impacts are associated with the things that we regulate. In addition, we had a listening session in the town of Paonia, and if I recollect, there was 90 some people that provided comment in a relatively small community, which was a great turnout. If I remember correctly, it was, you know, quite long, 3 to 4 hour public listening session. And, you know, I think that was a great opportunity to see, you know, what was happening in that particular area. As a commissioner, I've also had the opportunity to tour Battlement Mesa as part of ECMC commissioner tour. And that included looking at the site that was being contemplated here. And in this community impact tour, and did include opportunities for the community to provide comment on site as to what they felt like the potential impacts associated with that were the proximity of homes, different views from the area, so that the commission at the time could understand what ultimately the concern was there and the potential impacts associated with that Battlement Mesa pad that was put in there. You know, that tour also included looking at sites and impacts associated with, you know, Craig and the North Park area, and it was a pretty broad tour. And so, you know, in all transparency, when I saw what was being contemplated on this community tour, I reached out to both of our community liaisons and shared that I wish that I see some really great things here. The flight I thought was a wonderful opportunity to get a bird's eye view, not only of the North Fork area, but the Roan Plateau and some of the areas in which are of concern for potential impact associated with oil and gas development. I thought there was a great opportunity to go look at coal mine methane capture and combustion that was occurring in the North Fork Valley. I thought there was great opportunities to, you know, see and hear a lot of things, but I also saw some challenges associated with repeating some of the things that were done just a few years earlier, when in fact, a lot of the applications that we're seeing and the potential impacts associated with those applications were not even being contemplated to go look at, to hear about, or to see. And so what I would encourage us, because I'm very excited about these. I think community impact tours are something that I've been advocating for since I was on the commission. But I also want the community groups and the community liaisons that are helping develop these look more broadly at what the potential impacts are. What are the things, where are the areas that we're starting to see the most impacts? And if we're looking at trying to ensure that the community's voice is heard in future permitting decisions, looking at where those impacts are anticipated in being and making sure we understand and hear from the communities in which these decisions may be made. And so when I look at the Western Slope and I look at what might be coming down the pipeline for potential permitting, I think the areas that were being contemplated for the flight would have created an incredible opportunity to see from a landscape level, and I have been on those flights before in that exact area. It was very impactful to see that. I've been on the Terror Ditch tour as well. And while certainly an unfortunate and problematic situation, I would agree with Chair Robbins that I'm not sure that that is directly related to things that we regulate. It's unfortunate that the Terra ditch sits on top of an abandoned coal mine. It's unfortunate that the mine shafts are collapsing underneath the Terra ditch, and there's no question that there's geologic challenges associated with that. But in the big picture of looking at the areas that I think are going to be most impacted and to hear from the communities that are going to be most impacted from future development, areas like Rio Blanco County, Moffett County, Western Garfield County, Mesa County, these areas where we're actually seeing activity, new activity being contemplated, and in some areas at a very significant scale. I was disappointed to not be able to look at or hear or see those. North Park, again, is an area that continues to see, additional contemplated development, and to not have that be a part of what we're looking at or hearing about as we're contemplating future permits. I would like to hear from all community members in any areas where there's potential impacts. But as we look at prioritizing resources and time and areas where we can actually get a perspective for decisions that we may be making in the near future, I think those all need to be part of the decision making as to where and how we're planning tours like this. And so was certainly disappointed to hear that, in reaction, it was a lot of good things were canceled, not only by ECMC for certain reasons, but also by the community groups themselves chose to cancel some things because I still think there was a great opportunity there to understand potential impacts associated with some near-term decisions that we may have to make. And I look forward to re-engaging on this and seeing if there's opportunities to really understand the potential impacts associated with decisions we may be making in the near future in areas where new development is being contemplated and will actually be occurring. And so those are my thoughts, and appreciate the perspective here, but would also like to encourage, as the community liaisons and the community groups are contemplating, where these things should be and what needs to be seen, that they also contemplate where new development is actually most likely going to be happening, and make sure that in an attempt to influence or better understand what potential impacts are to community, that we focus on those areas.
Thank you, Commissioner Messner. Any other commissioners with comments at this point? All right, let's take a short break and re-engage. Let's return at 9:55. That's about 7 minutes out. All right, welcome back. This is the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. It is Wednesday, the 26th, and we have our general business agenda before us. I believe next we'll hear from Ms. Sorensen. Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Chair, we do have a consent agenda.
Oh, thanks. It's what happens when you take some time off. Let's take up the consent agenda. Does anyone have questions on consent? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve consent?
So moved.
Do we have a
Second.
second? Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Now we will turn to an update from the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment. Tessa Sorensen, the CDPHE Energy Liaison, you're recognized. Welcome to our show.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioners. Let me share my screen here in a moment. Can you see it okay? Excellent. My name is Tessa Sorensen. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Energy Liaison for the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment in the Administration Division and Executive Director's Office. I am responsible for all of the upstream energy related items that come through the state regulatory processes, and especially between CDPHE and ECMC both. So I regularly represent multiple divisions within the CDPHE, and today I am mostly going to be talking about air. So today I'd like to share with ECMC and the commissioners and the members of the public about regional NOx intensity and the engine standards. Part of this is in response to some commissioner questions from the last update that APCD gave you in terms of how different engines compare in terms of emissions and whatnot. And so we hope to answer that a little bit today. Okay, so we're going to run through a little bit of the CDPHE and ECMC NOx intensity rules, the EPA engine standards, and a little bit of NOx intensity. I don't really have a slide on the rules. What I will say on that is that it is largely covered under the regulatory references that ECMC makes in their rules, which refer almost all substantive air emissions requirements to APCD or AQCC's regulations, the Air Quality Control Commission, specifically around regulation number 7. And a lot of these are under regulation 7, part B6E. So a lot of these are around the NOx intensity as well as pre-production operations. It should be noted that CDPHE does not have much jurisdiction over pre-production emissions for oil and gas, but we do pretty firmly in terms of overall NOx intensity and greenhouse gas emissions. So let's talk about engines for a little bit. Engines are regulated by the US EPA. And in this case, for pre-production engines, we are talking about drilling engines. These are large engines used to provide power to drilling rigs. They're also large engines used to provide power to the pumps and mixers associated with hydraulic fracturing. These are probably the largest sources of emissions we see overall in the pre-production phase of oil and gas exploration and development. And they are very large engines. They're considered non-road. So they're not meant to be driven on the road on those. They're not used for that. They're not transportation vehicles. They're very high power rated. These tend to fall in the 560 to 900 kilowatts category. It's also important to note that the federal government has primacy on all engine standards. The state cannot actually mandate a specific engine to be used because that would preempt the federal regulations. So instead, we have achieved some emissions reductions through providing what I will call a menu of options that will succeed in or will definitely contribute to satisfying NOx intensity goals, as well as emissions intensities that we are looking for. It's also worth noting that we are not specifically talking about, when we're talking about intensity, local impacts to public health. We're talking about regional impacts to air quality. EPA has a lot of classifications for engine standards. Specifically for non-road in this power rating category, there are about 6 options if you include natural gas. They're designated by tier, or tier 1, tier 2, tier 4, or what's called tier 4 final. Tier 1s were standards are for all that are manufactured prior to 2006. These are always tied to manufacturing years. Tier 2 is 2006 to 2010. Tier 4 is 11 to 14, and Tier 4 final is anything that's 2015 or up to now. They have not updated any of those rules yet. We were expecting something around next year, but these standards processes do take several years to go through, and we're never sure exactly when they're going to happen. Excuse me. These are also, it's if you're ever searching for this for the EPA, they're called non-road compression ignition engines if you're talking about diesel. If you're talking about natural gas, they're actually labeled as large spark ignition engines. And so it's a little bit different on that. They only have two tiers, one before 2007 and one 2007 until now. So it's worth noting that just saying a tier 2 engine may be very confusing if you don't actually designate that it's natural gas versus diesel. So let's look at what those general emissions looks like. Now, these are emission standards. When you take your car to go get your emissions checked so you can get your registration updated, these are the types of standards that these engines are held to. So this is what the thresholds they have to be below in order to pass these standards. They are not the emissions that are coming out of the actual engine. Those are unique to each engine and the load being put on it. And it is also it really depends on how much you're using it and when, all the different conditions, how old the engine may be. So they, when brand new, are likely well below these thresholds. But it really depends upon that. You could see that I want you to look at the yellow ones in particular because they're kind of the new ones. But tier 2 diesel were very frequently used and they're still used out in the field in various areas of the state. And they're probably the most common. You'll also notice there's no tier 3. There's no such thing as a tier 3 diesel when you're talking about this power category for non-road engines. The biggest things to focus on here is some of the differences in how the standards are written. There's NOx, NMHC stands for non-methane hydrocarbons. NOx is nitrogen oxides, PM is particulate matter, and CO is carbon monoxide, of course. So if you notice, tier 1s had upwards of 10 when you combine the non-methane hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides. You can't just add those two. It's somewhat approximate if you do so. It's a different measurement when it's combined, but it's worth noting. You'll also notice the units are the same across all of these. So you're looking at somewhere around 10 combined, down to about 6. So we've eliminated about 40% of the emissions for NOx in tier 2 diesels from tier 1. When you go down to tier 4 final, you are looking more like 4. So you've actually brought it down even more. In terms of the carbon monoxide, we're going from 11 down to about 3.5, and it pretty much hangs out there. Natural gas, you'll notice, is a little different. The carbon monoxide is actually higher, as is the CO2, which is not on this table. But the NOx and non-methane hydrocarbons are lower than a tier 4. So there is a trade-off. Roughly speaking, a tier 4 diesel engine is about 50 to 60% of the emissions of a tier 2 diesel. And it really depends on which way you're measuring it and which particular pollutant you are actually referring to in this for how good something is. One thing that's really important to note when you're looking at these values is they don't have equal impact upon NOx and ozone formation. NOx contributes to ozone about 80 times more than carbon monoxide. So if we're looking specifically at achieving intensity, or I should say ozone goals, it is more important to reduce NOx than it is carbon monoxide, specifically for reducing ozone impacts. That is not saying we shouldn't reduce both. It's just for that particular purpose, you get more from NOx reduction. And so if you're going for ozone control, natural gas is a better way to go than diesel. Now, our NOx intensity program has some very specific goals that were laid out. It aligns with a March 2023 directive from the governor's office, as well as Colorado Senate Bill 24229, about a 30% reduction in NOx from upstream oil and gas, specifically in the ozone non-attainment area during the summer months by 2025 and 50% by 2030. So when you're looking at these tables, you're looking at a baseline. Those reduction percentages are from the 2017 numbers. So that's our starting point. That's where we're starting from. So we want to get to 50% of 6931 tons per season of NOx emissions by 2030. We are on track for that. So our 2025 target was 4,852 tons with an average tons of day for 31.7. Something I really want to highlight here before I go on to the next slide is what an intensity target is. This is not a threshold. There are going to be instances that are uncontrollable in some cases due to weather, due to environment, due to climate, due to operational differences, where if we laid a threshold, those pre-production operation emissions would actually spike above that threshold. That is expected and that is normal. So it is not a threshold goal, it's an intensity. Now, when we talk about intensity, it's not just an average of the emissions either, it's the emissions per barrel produced. So it is weighted based on the actual production of the operator as a whole within the ozone non-attainment area. This is included in AQCC Reg 7. It's Part B, Section 6.E. That establishes the use and operational restrictions. This is the menu that I referred to beforehand. This is the list of options that operators have to select from for drilling and hydraulic fracturing. And 6E Section 2 limits the quantity of NOx emissions that can be released per barrel of oil equivalent produced. So this does cover natural gas production as well. It's just converted into barrels equivalent in terms of that. This makes it so that we have a relative contribution based on the operator's production status within the basin in the ozone non-attainment area, so that they can be achievable at all levels. There are two different classifications on that for major and minor operators. I won't go into the details because it can get quite complicated. But the big point is that the largest contributors have a stricter target to meet because they have more operations and more emissions that are going into the air. So that's really the design of what this intensity is. It's not relevant to this particular regulation to say that one entire hydraulic fracturing setup or there's an operator and they have a drilling setup and they're using tier 2 diesels. And that's going to put out a lot of stuff that is higher than what you'd want for this NOx intensity. They might. Unfortunately, that doesn't really apply so much as long as their overall operations during the entire season, when measured against their barrels of oil equivalent produced, are below that intensity threshold. You can offset those higher emission engine instances with electrification, for instance, where you don't have any emissions really related to that. So the current menu. The current menu is for drill rigs. It can be powered by grid or non-fossil fuel generated sources. Common times we're looking at grid on this for electrification. That's certainly not always feasible because there's a lot that has to happen in order for electrification to happen. These are huge power demands. They require, and the power may be there, but the infrastructure may not be to support it. So you may not have electrical substations or power substations that can support it. You may not have the power lines out there in the first place. Installing power lines for miles and miles requires a lot of right-of-way work. It can actually change the environment and the ecosystem as well. One thing I was surprised to learn when we were looking into this years ago was that installing a bunch of power lines where they didn't exist before that are above ground can actually change the ecosystem of birds, because it does give them extra places to nest on top of those power lines, of those poles. So there's a lot of complications that can go into this. Tier 4 final diesels, these include use of dual fuel Tier 4. When I say dual fuel, I'm talking about natural gas supplemented diesel engines. So it's a mix between diesel and natural gas. Tier 2 diesel engines with manufacturer guaranteed practices to be Tier 4 compliant. This is a really special category. It is basically a, for lack of a better word, stapled on technology onto a Tier 2 diesel engine that gives it the emission profile through additional captures and other technologies to have less emissions and be comparable to a Tier 4. So it is basically taking an old engine and getting an extra layer of emissions capture out of it, so the ultimate emissions into the air are equivalent to a Tier 4. Tier 2 natural gas generators, which may include battery storage. The reason battery storage is important is it helps to manage those spikes in power demand. So you can say that I only need, we'll make up a number, 1,000 in this case. I'm not going to put units here because I don't know what units we'd do to be appropriate to this analogy. But if we needed 1,000, but it can normally only provide 800, but I'm only using it at 400 for 30% of the time, I can store the extra in a battery and use it to meet that 1,000 spike when it happens. So that's how that battery supplementation works. We also have an option there for other technology or operational optimization methods that the division has approved, the air division in this case. That is there because we cannot predict what technologies come out. The most innovative technologies come out of industry, and we do not want to limit industry. We love it when they come up with new innovations, do new research, find new ways to improve their processes on this. A really good example is there are variable frequency drives that are implemented on a lot of newer frac fleets, and those allow you to use only the power that you need to use, as opposed to running the engines full tilt the entire way, just in case you have a high draw. That leads to less emissions because you're not running them as hard in times when you're not using them as hard. Our in-use requirements for hydraulic fracturing are very similar, but a little more limited. They can be Tier 4, they could be electrical, they can be natural gas-fired engines or turbines, or again, any other technologies we have. So you'll notice that the Tier 2 with extra technology is not in there unless it is really proven to be on there, but generally it's not. So you can't have that extra option in there. How successful have we been? Here is some relative counts of how many rigs have used certain engines that have been reported to APCD. I will note something here. Most of these rules did go into effect around 2023 and 2024. And sometimes it takes a few years for approved applications subject to these rules for the ECMC to occur in real time. So you could have a 2 or 3 year delay sometimes between approval of a location and the technology used to do it. Now, APCD works a little differently on ECMC in terms of their general rules go into play for specific years at specific times and by dates. And so after certain dates, those rules will have to happen regardless of the permit application because those permit applications are separate. In ECMC, they are subject to the permit application date, not when they do it. So if somebody applied in 2024 and they may not be subject to certain rules that ECMC has, they will still not be subject to that, but they do have to satisfy APCD rules that are in place at the time. So there's a little complexity there in terms of which rules are applicable to what, and it's something that operators are constantly having to juggle. It's notable that we have seen an increase in Tier 4 on here, and we have also seen an increase in grid power here, especially when, and we're actually seeing more and more of that. It looks like it's dropping by these numbers. If you look at 2026's initial reports, which we're not there yet, we don't have it yet, but from what we've seen in permit approvals from ECMC and the commitments through the enhanced systems and practices that have been implemented by ECMC rules, we do expect the numbers of Tier 2 to drop significantly. We also expect the numbers of grid power to increase significantly. So we are going up on that front. And so I wanted to highlight that. You'll notice that there's a lot of hybrid categories in here. combinations of grid and something else. So if you look at this left table, you'll notice there's a lot of grid plus something else because they're supplementing them, their engines with the grid, which does reduce the overall emissions. So at first glance, it looks like we're dropping on things, but we're actually increasing. Our program results have been excellent. If you look at our emissions for 2025 that were reported, and we're still working on the full annual emissions for 2025, those aren't due yet. But if you also look at 2024, we have that baseline that we had to reduce from was 6930. And we wanted to get to 30% by 2025. We did achieve that. That number, 2,400, is subject to change. That is an interim emission. That is not the annual emissions that we know of for sure. It could go up, it could go down, it could vary a little bit, but we're definitely, we're pretty sure we're going to be under that target. So we have actually achieved that, what we set out to do, and we're going to keep achieving that when we get into 2030 goals. But you can see that we went down 20%. We wanted to go down 20% by 2024, and we actually went down 54%. So we are a lot farther along than we ever could have hoped, and it has been very, very successful as a program. At this point, I'd like to open it up to questions with the note that, again, these are regional impacts. If the commission would like to hear about local public health impacts, we're going to get into complexities such as toxic air contaminants and whatnot, which is a much, much, much more complicated topic, and we are still actually working on with a QCC implementation. So that might not be a topic for 3 months from now, but rather next year.
Thank you very much for the presentation. A lot of really good information for commissioners and our stakeholders to listen into and digest. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Oath?
Thanks, Ms. Sorensen. Excellent presentation. Thank you so much. I have a question from slide 4. If you want to scroll back, I appreciated how you framed this in terms of looking at both the reductions over, in the different types of technology between NOx and CO, and particularly around that jump for tier 1 natural gas for CO to 50, right? A pretty big difference. But then for tier 2, I noticed it went dramatically back down to 4.4. So I was curious about how that happened. That seems like a really significant leap.
I'm not. Okay, yes. Thank you for the question, Commissioner. I do have an okay understanding of that particular jump, but I can't say that I'm an expert. So I'm going to preface my answer with that. My understanding is that, and if you read the EPA details on these particular standards for natural gas spark ignition engines, it's really because they weren't in heavy usage prior to 2007. So they were somewhat new things for the EPA to try and tackle at the time. And so I don't think the emissions were incredibly well understood during that time. And the tier 2 natural gas standards, I think, obviously got a lot closer to where they wanted to be in terms of not just what the standard should be, but how they should be measured when you're talking about a natural gas engine. Because the emissions profile, when you look at all of the contaminants that are in there, it's pretty complex because you are now not burning you're not burning a liquid so much that's being put under heavy pressure. You're burning a gas, which is being put under pressure, and they behave very differently in terms of the chemistry involved and how you can break those up. Also, the hydrocarbons that go into diesel fuel are fairly heavy. There's a reason we see octane in terms of our cars. That is a rating. It does not mean the amount of octane, but it is somewhat related to the amount of octane-like hydrocarbons, which has hundreds of variations on that one molecule alone that you can make and how it behaves. In natural gas, you're talking about much simpler hydrocarbons that are much easier to break apart when you burn them. So it does a lot of things to that chemistry and how it interacts, and that can also therefore change how it emits in terms of that.
Okay.
So there's a
Thank
lot of
you.
different complexities there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I believe it's because of technology jump.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe technology, but also the tier one natural gas was perhaps a standard set because to provide a huge buffer as they gathered more information.
Yeah.
So maybe not an actual representation of the amount of CO that would be emitted with a tier one natural gas. And so, okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
As with many things, new technologies are great when they come out, and regulatory has to catch up after.
Yeah, thanks.
Good, great, good questions. Good Q&A back and forth. Others with questions.
I do apologize for the lack of page numbers on half of my slides. I'll make sure that doesn't happen again.
Just keeping us on our toes. All right. Thank you very much. We'll make sure the slides get it to our website so folks can see them. There's a lot there and would take some time to digest all that. Thanks so much, Ms. Sorensen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioners. Anytime.
All right. Next, we have another presentation from CDPHE, Air Quality Enterprise presentation by Jeremy Newstifer. Hey there.
How are you all? Good to see you. Hold on, I gotta organize my stuff here. Do you want me to share my own slides, or is that something that you all can run? Okay, I can share my own slides.
Share your own slides would be easiest.
Yeah. All right.
Looks
Well,
good.
thanks for having me. Looks good. Okay, great. Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. My name is Jeremy Newstifter, and I am the manager of the Air Quality Enterprise. I also manage the Clean Fleet Enterprise here at CDPHE. But I'm here today to talk about the Air Quality Enterprise and provide an update to this commission. So thanks again for having me. All right, so I intend for this presentation to be informational in nature. I do welcome dialogue at any time, so please go ahead and stop me. That's kind of how I prefer to present. And I believe that this is the first time that this commission has received a briefing on the Air Quality Enterprise. So I will go into a bit of detail regarding the history, the statutory authority of the enterprise before talking about our accomplishments thus far. And then I'll finish up with the discussion of future planning. And hopefully allows for some time for discussion about opportunities for collaboration between the enterprise and this commission. So the Air Quality Enterprise was established in 2020 under Senate Bill 204, and it's administered by CDPHE through MOUs. So I'm a CDPHE employee, but I consider it such that I work for the enterprise, although of course I work for the state. Like any other state enterprise in Colorado, the AQE operates as a government-owned business that's funded through fees. I know this commission, being at DNR, has some exposure to state enterprises, so I won't go into what that means, but I am happy to delve more into the nature of enterprises if that's something that you all want to talk about. We are governed by a 10-member board of directors. It consists of 9 members appointed by the governor, and then 1 member is the executive director of CDPHE or their designee. So Patrick Cummins, who you all probably know, currently sits on the board as executive director Ryan's designee. Senate Bill 2204 has a pretty lengthy legislative declaration. And while I say it's lengthy, it's really interesting. It's actually quite an interesting read. It shows a lot of the history of the issues concerning air quality, especially around that time, and the need for research. So for sake of time, I actually had an AI chatbot summarize it for us, and I think it did a pretty good job. So I'm just going to go ahead and read that. So the General Assembly, again, this is an AI chatbot reading the legislative declaration, recognize that Colorado faces serious air quality challenges that adversely affect public health, the environment, and the economy, and that addressing those challenges requires science-based strategies to reduce ozone precursors, greenhouse gases, and other pollutants. The General Assembly found that improved monitoring, emission inventories, modeling, research, and access to trusted scientific data can produce better environmental outcomes, inform effective and cost-effective ozone control strategies, support meaningful community engagement, and provide a level and competitive playing field for businesses. It further recognized that the value of an independent enterprise capable of providing monitoring, research, and other air quality services to regulated entities, communities, and state regulators, which ultimately form the business or form the creation of the air quality enterprise as a business. So I think the simplest way to think about it is that the AQE is something the General Assembly created as a dedicated funding mechanism for air quality science, data, new technology, and air emission mitigation work that can complement but is distinct from the regulatory and policy work that's being done at the Air Pollution Control Division and the Air Quality Control Commission. So as I mentioned, the enterprise is governed by a board of 10 members. So again, 9 are appointed by the governor, and 1 is the executive director or their designee of CDPHE. So three of the members have to be researchers in the air quality space. We have 2 representatives that are representatives of fee payers. So for purposes of this enterprise, we try to have 1 representative of the oil and gas industry and 1 representative of the electric utilities, as they make up the majority of our fee payers, as we'll talk about in a minute. We have to have 2 current air quality control commissioners. We have to have 1 person with business management expertise and 1 person who is a toxicologist, epidemiologist, pathologist, pulmonologist, cardiologist, or expert in a similar field related to public health and the environment. So this is the current makeup. I will note many of our current board members are term limited here pretty soon, so we will be having to recruit for new members. So if any of you have ideas of folks that might be great for the board or anybody who's listening to this meeting, I would love some emails, as we'll have to be planning for that in the next couple of years or next year. The board does meet quarterly in February, May, August, and November. The board they're made up of volunteers, so nobody's paid. And the board steers the direction of the enterprise and approves all project solicitations and awards. This slide is just to show the organizational structure, and that the air quality enterprise, while it is housed within CDPHE, it is separate and distinct from the Air Quality Control Commission and the Air Pollution Control Division. So we certainly coordinate in many ways. We also use Air Pollution Control Division services, such as fiscal services and contract administrators. But that being said, we are separate and distinct and provide funding for those services to staff where appropriate. So our authorizing statute established authority for the enterprise board to set fees each year not to exceed what you see on this slide. So it was a tiered approach, 1 million in 2022, 3 million in 23, 4 million in 2024, and 5 million or less thereafter from 2025 and beyond. So it also directed the board to establish fees by rule. So in 2021, the board promulgated annual fees based on air pollutant emissions as authorized under the statute, which states that in part, the board shall establish by rule enterprise fees, which may include fees in the amount that in the aggregate reflects the value of the services provided. So fees were established in Regulation 1. I'll show you that here shortly. And I also just want to note that the air quality enterprise is actually the smallest enterprise in the state in terms of annual revenue, but it does receive quite a bit of attention given the nature of the enterprise and the demand for its services. And that attention has really ramped up recently in light of federal funding or lack of federal funding, I should say. So we can talk about that a bit more, but I do think that the state of Colorado is seeing the value of the air quality enterprise more than ever right now, given the federal funding situation that we're in. So as I mentioned, the General Assembly left it to the enterprise to establish the form of the fee. So it did so in Reg 1, choosing to collect fees per ton of air pollutant emitted by a stationary source proportionately among the top 150 emitting companies. So that's companies, not sources, but companies whose stationary sources emit the highest sum of all air pollutants for which a division fee is paid. And I know that's somewhat confusing, but just think about it. The top 150 companies are the fee payers to the air quality enterprise. And the rationale behind that approach back in 2021 was effectively that the top 150 emitting companies in Colorado account for roughly 80% of overall stationary source emissions in the state of Colorado. And as I mentioned before, the most represented industries are oil and gas and electric generation. So here's a timeline of our project solicitations thus far. It took some time to get the first RFP out the door, as you might imagine, with the enterprise being created in 2020, right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. Of course, we had to get our board in place. We had to establish bylaws, set fees and regulation, do all of that before we actually had any funds in the bank. Once the regulation was established, invoicing occurred, and we started to collect fees. Again, for that first fiscal year was 1 million is what the enterprise chose to collect. And with the little bit of funds that we had in the bank, they were able to issue RFP, the first RFP in 2023, which we referred to as the Ozone Round 1 solicitation. And so that submission deadline for project proposals was in May of 2023, and awards were made, or an award was made in September of 2023. Next, we ended up having what we call Ozone Round 2 in 2024. It's effectively the same solicitation, looking for projects concerning ozone, and I will show you the actual purposes of those shortly. And that submission deadline was in May of 2024, so a year later, and award decisions were made in August of 2024. And that's right about the time where I joined. I wanted to also note that there was really a full year of discussions around what we were calling the Comprehensive Air Quality Database RFP. We even gave it an RFP name and drafted it. This was a request of industry and of the board to look at potentially funding a comprehensive air quality database that incorporates all sorts of different factors. We ultimately ended up deciding to pause on doing that project as the Air Division is already moving full steam ahead with many of those efforts. So the intent is to wait to see what happens there. And if the Air Quality Enterprise needs to step in and provide funding for something like that in the future, we can certainly take that into consideration. For the final RFP 2025-2, we call this our New and Emerging Technologies RFP. This is what I'll talk about the most here as we move forward in the slides. And it's a pretty broad, comprehensive, overarching RFP, calls for projects on all sorts of different topics. And our response was incredibly encouraging. We got a number of proposals, 37 proposals actually for that, and 25 awards were made. All right. So here's the purpose of the first Ozone Round 1 RFP that the enterprise put out. It was a pretty broad call for proposals within this narrow scope of ozone in Colorado. This first RFP did have an emphasis on co-benefits. There was, as I mentioned before, there wasn't very much money in the cash fund at this point, as most of the funds that we had were being expended on administrative services at that point in time. But there was one more award that was made. And it was called the Comprehensive Evaluation of SIP Modeling and Emission Inputs. That award was made to the National Center for Atmospheric Research, or NCAR, up in Boulder. And this project is actually our first project to be completed. The final presentation was just given to the board several weeks ago. And this actually did produce a work product that's being used to this day and could be used by policymakers in the future. And you can find that information on our website if that's something that you're interested in. The second Ozone Round, or Ozone Round 2, was again in 2024. Effectively the same solicitation. There was more money in the bank. I think there was about $2.5 million in the cash fund at that time. And the emphasis was shifted a little bit to proposals that focus on addressing ozone issues within the Denver Metro North Front Range non-attainment area. And with that solicitation, we did receive 8 applications, 7 awards were made. And all of them, as you can see here, were of course focused on sort of esoteric issues concerning ozone. The awards were made to several nonprofit organizations, for-profit organizations, as well as one local government. And most of these projects that you see on your screen right here are actually nearing the ends of their contract periods. So we should be getting final results or final work products, and those will be presented to the board likely throughout 2027 and 2028. And I would encourage any members of the public or of this commission to join if you want to see some educational information on ozone. All right, so The APU's most recent solicitation, released in August 2025, it was titled Advancing Air Quality in Colorado Through New and Emerging Technologies. This RFP was intentionally broad in scope. It was intended to be evergreen, meaning it would remain open for an indefinite period of time. However, the release coincided with the pullback of nearly all federal funds, mostly from NSF or National Science Foundation, for air quality research. So we ended up receiving a significant number of proposals early, like very early on, that ultimately prompted the board to pause new submissions in March 2026, and we're still in that pause state right now. So again, we received 37 proposals seeking roughly $22 million in awards. Proposals were reviewed and scored by an expert review panel in accordance with the RFP. That expert review panel that was comprised mostly of CDPHE employees, but there were several others from other state agencies, including CDOT. I would note that for future solicitations, I have been in conversations with staff at ECMC, and I would like to have somebody from ECMC as a part of that review panel in the future. So I presented recommendations made by the expert review panel to the board on May 5th for awards, and again, that resulted in 25 total projects being awarded, with about $12.1 million being awarded between May and August of this year. So this was a huge effort, and I'll go through just a list of those projects. Hopefully you had an opportunity to take a look at this beforehand, and if there are any projects that I go through in the next couple of slides that anyone wants to talk about in particular, just keep in mind we're still executing the contracts on these projects. We don't have any work products, any final data products, or anything like that, but I'm happy to pull up the executive summaries and talk about what the projects are intended to accomplish. So I've highlighted a few for myself, for you all, to point out that may be of interest. I think what you'll see as I scroll through these slides is a pretty broad diversity and topics, which is exactly what we were hoping for. And the ones I'll highlight, I hope to highlight a bit of that diversity as well. So, for example, Project 2, I'll discuss these in terms of proposal or project numbers that you can see on the left from University of Colorado. This is an interesting one. It's developing an energy-efficient photochemical reactor for mitigating methane and air pollutant emissions from diffuse methane sources. I highlighted that one because it sounds like it might have an oil and gas impact. It could in the future. I don't know, but the intent of this is actually to ground truth a new technology at CU that can photochemically react methane at very, very low concentrations. And the primary hope for that is to be used in the agricultural space, which there are not a whole lot of control technologies for right now. So the board and I were quite excited to see that, and looking forward to seeing that project move forward over the next couple of years. Another one I wanted to highlight is Project 4. This was the first project that was awarded to sort of a traditional environmental NGO and EDF. It's called Unseen Emissions, Lasting Air Impacts, Characterizing Air Pollution and Cumulative Health Risks from End-of-Life Oil and Gas Wells in Colorado. The board actually deferred a decision on this proposal on May 5th when the initial recommendations were made. The board, with much discussion, ultimately decided to fund the project just this month. And so I'm currently working with staff to move forward with a contract execution with EDF for that proposal. The intent of that proposal is to really look at 50 end-of-life oil and gas wells and quantify emissions from those wells, and then make a cumulative health assessment of sorts. More details can be found on our website. And again, we're just entering into the contracting phase right now. But I am happy to answer any questions that I can in terms of what was provided in proposals. Let's see here. Another one that I just wanted to highlight real quickly is this using tempo in support of state of Colorado emissions permitting and monitoring processes by UCAR. That's project number 5. You'll see if you look through our projects that tempo is a pretty consistent theme. Tempo is a satellite-based monitoring technology. It's a high-resolution satellite-based monitoring technology that can look at a suite of different air pollutants. And I would just say that researchers right now are heavily interested in issues concerning remote sensing and how policymakers might be able to use these new technologies for decision making in the future. And there are a number of proposals that are taking into consideration those remote sensing parameters, including into modeling as well. I'd also point out we have some smaller projects like number 7 from Sentinel Detection Systems, or Cordonix. This is a small for-profit company, and they're basically ground truthing a new technology that they've developed for VOC and methane monitoring from from wells that have been plugged. And so I thought that one might be of interest to you all. And the enterprise board felt that was a good use of funds in the context of this RFP, given that we had a pretty significant amount of money that we were looking to award. Also highlight that there are some pretty new innovative projects, such as Project 16 from NLR, formerly NREL, where they're going to be looking at electric load growth and air quality impacts that could be associated with the rise in data centers in the state of Colorado, which I know is an interest or a topic of everybody's interest right now. Let's see here. And then lastly, I just want to point out this Project 35. The board was approached with helping to fund the Intermountain West Ozone Exchange Conference, which is being organized by the North Front Range Metropolitan Planning Organization and the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. They had originally asked for $100,000 to help offset registration fees for that conference, which is happening in October of this year. And the board actually decided to hold a special meeting and decided to increase that award from 100 to 300,000. And so we're proud to be supporters of that conference. And I imagine some folks at ECMC may be interested in attending. If any of you have interest in that, I'm happy to send you the materials. You can also see a link to the website for registration on the Air Quality Enterprises website. So with that, I'm going to stop before we move into sort of future project considerations and see if anybody has any questions that you want to address about what's been done thus far.
Really cool stuff. Thanks for the presentations to date. And I know we got a little bit more, but we're at a break in terms of looking at the past stuff. Do commissioners have questions on that information so far? Commissioner Messner?
Thanks for being here. Presentation so far. I mean, this is really interesting stuff. Really appreciate the work that you're doing. I had a question about one of the other projects, and then kind of I guess a bigger, broader question first is, understanding that kind of the focus of it is, emissions and air quality science and the things that you highlighted. As you're looking at projects coming in or looking at projects that are being funded, are there projects that are looking more specifically, or is it allowed to have projects that are looking more specifically at, direct public health impacts or toxicological studies or things like that could be funded by this enterprise?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Commissioner. Yes, in short, the answer is yes, and that is the direction that the enterprise board has given me for calendar year 2027. So really, planning in the fall of 2026, moving into calendar year 2027, is to look for opportunities for emission mitigation projects, things that we can fund that will directly have benefits in terms of air quality impacts, but also to the fee payer. And we do have a number of project ideas in mind, several of which focus on the oil and gas industry. We're of course in conversations with the fee payers as well about what they would like to see funded in terms of studies and emission mitigation projects. And then, yes, it is very clear in the statute, and it's been and from the board itself that we're very interested in looking at potentially funding sort of health studies, those types of things. It was very much implied that would eventually be a part of the core mission of the AQE. So those are the things that we're thinking about now that we've kind of got our footing and gotten 33 projects funded to date. And so, direct benefit emission mitigation projects, those types of things are what we're really hoping to focus on in 2027, 2028.
Great. Certainly from my perspective, that type of study is vitally important for the work that we do here. And so I would love to see, um, more studies that look at both direct public health impacts, toxicological impacts, as well as cumulative impacts associated with multiple well pads, in proximity to people. So just my thoughts there. And then I was curious about Project 15, which I think came from CU, and what kind of the goal of that one. I mean, I kind of understand it, but I'm not sure how
Yeah.
the efficacy in empowering Colorado communities, or what the goal of it was, because it seems interesting.
Yeah, with all 33, and some of them feeling so similar, I don't remember off the top of my head what the details of that are, but if you give me about 5 seconds, I can probably pull up the executive summary if you'd like for me to provide additional details on that, or I'd be happy to follow up with in writing regarding that project. All of these are pretty complex projects, and it might actually be easier to just read through a couple paragraphs than have me try to explain it and bumble through my words.
Yeah, that'd be fine. You can just send it to me, or you can also say, look at the website. But was kind of
it's probably
curious.
easier for me to send it to you. Yeah, with as many projects as we have, it's probably easier for me to send it to you. But happy to do that.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Booth?
Thanks, Mr. Newstifter. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Have some comments that I guess are related to the discussion you were just having with Commissioner Messner. So maybe I'll make them here, even though it's a little bit related to, I think, the next part of your presentation about kind of as the enterprise is looking forward and some of the opportunities that you all were just discussing. I had, recommended that the commission invite you and the air quality enterprise here to do exactly this, right? Provide us with this information and have an opportunity to have some discussion as a follow-up to a report that was issued by a panel that ECMC had convened to review several recent public health studies. That panel reviewed those studies to help ECMC and our stakeholders better understand those studies and inform future policy discussion. But also, that panel was specifically asked to identify future research gaps and opportunities. And so, while ECMC isn't a research agency, right? We don't conduct research ourselves. But I feel that totally one of our roles here is to share with those who either do conduct research or who fund research, like the Air Quality Enterprise, about what either we see as needed or what we hear from experts like those on the panel, as well as what we hear from our stakeholders about kind of research needs. And as you all were discussing, I was happy to see on the slide included as one of the enterprise's core missions is includes improving understanding of potential health impacts, right? So that certainly fits well within your mission and is a great opportunity, I think, for collaboration here. And so wanted to be sure to share with you, with the enterprise through you, I guess, kind of what the panel identified as future research opportunities. And it's very consistent with what Commissioner Messner was just noting, right, which was some language at the end of the report. And I'll just try to highlight it quickly and point you to it, or happy to have follow-up conversation, but is around this need to better understand and evaluate the aggregate risk from living near multiple well paths. And then also identified the importance of researchers working closely in collaboration with operators so that there's this ability to get real-time operational activities squared with what is observed in terms of air emissions. Would be really helpful and seen. And then I think there's also some specific call outs from those experts around trying to better understand acute exposures and sort of the design of certain studies to help understand, what we're seeing in terms of endpoints. And so I just think this can kind of generally maybe be our way of sharing with you as your board is thinking about future requests for proposals, or as you're designing kind of your solicitations in the future. Last thing I'll say is also that if you have time to stick around after your presentation, the next presentation is actually related to other follow-up pieces from that panel's work, including comments that we received from our stakeholders. And some of those relate specifically to ideas and thoughts on research, which are really quite consistent with what the panel said and what Commissioner Messner was also identifying. So, if you've got a chance to stick around, that would be great. I really appreciate knowing that the enterprise is a resource that is doing this great work, and look forward to kind of opportunities for collaboration. So thanks again.
Thanks, Commissioner, and thank you for the invite. I appreciate it. Yes, so I've had an opportunity to read through the study and the data gaps that I think ECMC is hoping to fill. Those are all areas that fit well within the core mission of the AQE, I think. And that is all to say, of course, that we have a lot of stakeholders. Obviously, fee payers are an incredibly important stakeholder, and we will be engaging in a stakeholder engagement process in the near term and early 2027 to solicit project ideas. And importantly, though, state agencies are very much a stakeholder in this, and in ECMC, we certainly consider a very important stakeholder in this. And where ECMC sees a need for research or to fill data gaps, I think the enterprise and the enterprise board will take that seriously and into consideration. I would also encourage the enterprise I would encourage the commission to allow staff to continue to engage with me behind the scenes to further develop ideas for project solicitations that would benefit both fee payer, potentially, hopefully, ECMC, and then tangentially the Air Pollution Control Division as well. We're always hoping to find co-benefits with our projects. So just short answer, Commissioner Oath, is yes. I've had an opportunity to review those ideas, and I think they're something that's very much worth talking about with the enterprise board. And one thing I did want to note real quickly, because it kind of skimmed over it in the revenue slide, in terms of talking about how much funding we have. You'll see, so the enterprise chose to collect the maximum allowed under the statute all the way through FY 25-26, and then most recently for FY 26-27, we did reduce fees to $3.5 million. For this one fiscal year. I just wanted to note, though, that was a decision that was made for this fiscal year, and next year the revenue requirement, like every year thereafter, will be determined on an individual basis based on the needs of the enterprise. And we did put a memo out explaining the rationale and justification for lowering fees for this year. But just wanted to point that out. We're expecting to have about $2-ish million going into collecting fees in October of this year. And so for calendar year 27, we're expected to have about $6 million in the bank, just as a point of reference for everybody.
All right.
Commissioner Oath, did I touch on any? I know I didn't get to the specific areas that you discussed. I just kind of wanted to broadly say all three of those areas of data gaps that you mentioned, I think are well within the statutory mission of the enterprise, as well as what I've heard from board members in terms of interest.
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate that.
Okay.
I'm going to continue with your presentation.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll keep it quick. This is only one slide here until we get to my final slide, which is just my contact information. As I mentioned, we do want to do stakeholder engagement, really engaging with fee payers, the research community, policymakers, regulators, and communities, of course, to come up with ideas for targeted project solicitations in 2027. I can't discuss any of the ones that we have in mind right now publicly, because I haven't discussed them publicly with my board yet. But I will say that we have a number of ideas that would affect, or that would involve the oil and gas industry in one way or another, and I'm looking forward to be able to talk about those ideas in a more public setting after our November planning meeting with the board. at which time I'd be happy to come back to ECMC and update you all on what we're planning to do in 2027, as I think you'd be quite interested, assuming the board is in agreement with the plans that we're putting into place right now. One of our
I was going to say, please do come back. We would be very interested. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Robbins. And as you can tell, we're very early in the process. I know the enterprise was created in 2020, but in reality, we're in year 3 effectively of having funds, and projects are just coming to fruition right now. So I look forward to updating this commission in the future as projects continue to be completed, and looking for opportunities to collaborate on future solicitations as well. And I also just wanted to note that new and emerging technologies RFP, the board has indicated to me that we want to keep that around and open it when we feel like it's appropriate to open. Again, it's a very broad call for projects. We may end up refining it to narrow the scope a little bit, but we do intend to reopen that RFP in 2027. We'll just not have the same level of funds available as we did for this first round. When we were able to award 25 different projects. And so with that, again, our planning retreat for the enterprise board is in November. We hope to put in writing the plans for 2027 in terms of our ideas for project solicitations, and then start our stakeholder engagement. And I look forward to further engaging with ECMC in whatever capacity you all want and allow. So with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions or give you your time back.
Thank you very much. Additional questions? Really great presentation.
All right. Thank you all so much. Good seeing you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda is a health panel study follow-up presentation. Maybe we can get through that, then we'll take a quick break. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Lauren Mercer-Gelman, Deputy Director for Policy, and I am here to provide a presentation on staff's follow-up on the Public Health Study Panel Report. Bear with me while I share my screen. You'd think I'd never done this before.
No worries. There you go. That looks great.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So good morning. For those listening, I'm Lauren Mercer-Gelman, Deputy Director for Policy, and I'm here to present on our follow-up from the Public Health Study Panel. I'm rehashing a few slides that were shared by Commissioner Oath in June when she originally presented on the Public Health Study Panel findings, just to sort of orient everybody. So just as a reminder, ECMC convened and Commissioner Oath led an independent multidisciplinary panel to review 3 Colorado-based public health studies looking at potential public health impacts from oil and gas development. That group included folks from ECMC, CDPHE, epidemiologists, a physician, representatives of environmental NGOs, environmental justice groups, and industry. So it was a group with a lot of different expertise came together to review these 3 studies and meet with the study authors and provided a report summarizing that effort. As a reminder, here's what that panel's report did and did not do. It did summarize the studies, and the goal was to inform and educate for future policy discussions. However, it didn't make policy recommendations, change rules, change permit outcomes. When Commissioner Oath presented the panel's report, there were 4 follow-up items that she proposed and the Commission signed off on. One of those was a presentation by the Air Quality Enterprise, which we just heard. The other 3 were directions to staff. First, to seek public comment on the report, then to review specific operational activities and determine whether there are emission reduction opportunities from them. And finally, to hold a community webinar summarizing the panel's report. So those three follow-ups for staff are going to drive my agenda here this morning. First, the informational community meeting. So ECMC's Community Relations Unit hosts an informational community meeting every month with ECMC and other experts speaking on topics within ECMC's authority and expertise that are of interest to community members. In July, on July 21st, the informational community meeting focused on the health study panel report. And it was a really great webinar, I thought. And I've included a QR code here that if you scan it with your phone, that will take you right to the YouTube recording of the informational community meeting. That meeting had an overview from Commissioner Oath of the study's, the panel's findings, followed by a panel discussion with Commissioner Oath, Dr. Christy Richardson, who was the state toxicologist, and Dr. Jacob Fox, who is a physician who was on the panel. It was hosted and moderated by our Public Information Officer, John Brown, as well as the Community Relations Unit. And we had 37 folks in attendance. And then since then have had about 90 people on my last check who reviewed the YouTube video. And to me, I thought one of the most interesting parts of that webinar was the Q&A session. We held an open question and answer opportunity for folks who were in attendance to ask questions that the panelists answered. And they took some hard-hitting and tough questions and I think provided thoughtful answers. Questions included things like, why does ECMC still permit locations near communities when we know that there may be public health risks? How do we ensure that cumulative impacts of multiple developments are being taken into account? How do we ensure that, we're able to act on the science before it's too late to do, to enact protections? So really thoughtful questions, and we really appreciated the engagement from the community in that webinar. Next, sort of concurrent with that time period, we put together a survey to solicit public comments on the Public Health Study Panel report. It was available on ECMC's website for a little over a month. The commission sort of shouted it out in multiple commission hearings as well as that community webinar to ensure that folks were aware of their ability to comment. We did only receive 8 responses, which candidly surprised me a little. I thought we'd hear from more folks, but I'd offer 2 observations around that. One is that we had such a robust dialogue with community members during that informational community meeting that I'd imagine that a lot of folks who maybe would have submitted a public comment instead decided to show up and speak with the panel at that meeting. The second observation I'd share is that I think it's really a quality over quantity matter here. The responses that we got were really thoughtful and detailed. So while we didn't get a ton of feedback from a ton of different people, the feedback that we got was very thoughtful. I'm going to attempt to summarize some of the high points of the comments in my next few slides, but the full public comments are in today's commission hearing portfolio. So commissioners, if you haven't already, I would ask you to give those a read. And if others who are listening are curious what folks thought, they're publicly available. One of the questions we asked as sort of a preliminary question on the survey was whether folks had read the report or its summary and whether it was understandable. And I was really happy to see that 100% of the respondents said that it was understandable to them, which is really important as we work on accessibility and trying to translate some of these really technical concepts into plain language. I was happy to see that at least this segment of folks thought we hit that mark. So there were 2 really substantive questions that the survey asked. The first was whether the commenters would recommend that ECMC encourage, facilitate, or take part in additional research related to public health impacts of oil and gas. On that point, or that question, 87.5% of our respondents said yes. And this next slide, or next two slides, goes into some of the recommendations that folks had for what kind of research they would like to see us encourage. So I hope the air quality enterprise folks are still here, because I think some of these suggestions do dovetail with their work. I won't read the full list, but I think the general priority of prioritizing research that will directly inform public health decision making was something, a theme that we heard from many folks. I thought personally, I found number 3 and 4 on this slide interesting, a review of, what policies being used elsewhere are protective of public health, and assessing the effectiveness of some of the BMPs and rule-based measures that we do require, to get sort of the science behind what those are doing. These were the rest of the suggestions, looking at long-term impacts, cumulative impacts, and I think 8 and 9 both sort of get at that sort of concept of looking at cumulative impacts, impacts over time, and more detailed studies. Our next sort of specific substantive question was, based on the findings of the report, would you like to see ECMC consider requirements for additional measures intended to protect public health? 100% of the respondents said yes, and the next question was, if so, what would you like to see? And this is sort of summarizing and cobbling together what we saw from folks directly responsive to that question. The most common recommendation we received from public commenters was to increase the setbacks. I know the commission had some initial discussion around this when Commissioner Oath presented the study report, and I think there was a general consensus that that was not something the commission has appetite for at this time. It is something that the public continues to advocate for. The next most common was requirements for continuous community air monitoring, with some specific recommendations, like make sure that monitoring is public, make sure it's done transparently by a third party. As the commission is aware, but folks listening might not be, air monitoring is not within ECMC's regulatory authority. It is, at least in some cases, within CDPHE's, but that is not something that we have the ability to require. Similarly, folks asked for expanded health surveillance, so collecting more data on health impacts for people living near oil and gas. I'm not sure what state agency would have authority to do that, but it is not ECMC. Another suggestion was ensuring that wells get plugged when they are no longer in use. This is something that ECMC has been focused on for a long time and is making strides more recently, with both our financial assurance rules that incentivize operators to plug their wells when they get to the end of their lives, our orphan well program, which plugs wells that don't have an operator, and even more recently, the marginal well plugging program that incentivizes and provides grants for the plugging of wells that are nearing the end of their lives. Folks also advocated for preventing drilling below homes, a robust evaluation of cumulative impacts in permitting, which is something that is new-ish to the commission's rules. Just within the last year, we've really stepped up the cumulative impact assessment that is required. And also folks advocating for a plan for implementing future research findings. Again, this is just a summary. I invite folks to read the full public comments in the portfolio. The next item that the commission asked staff to follow up on was a review of certain operational practices that were identified in the studies to determine whether there are emission reduction opportunities. Those four practices are closed loop tankless systems, separator maintenance, coil tubing mill out, and emptying sand canisters. And I'll dive into each of them specifically on the forthcoming slides. But sort of to put the conclusion at the beginning, that we didn't identify any big emission reduction opportunities from related to these practices. That might sound like bad news, but the reason that we didn't identify opportunities is because in each of these areas there have been advances either in industry practices or in many cases rules that have sort of already gotten us a lot better at reducing emissions from these practices between the time when the studies were collecting data and now. So that was sort of the biggest thing I found was that we've made a lot of strides in each of these areas. And along with that, didn't identify any major opportunities. But let's dig in a little deeper. So the first, oh, and actually before I dig in, I did want to make sure to thank our partners at CDPHE, both Ms. Sorensen, who you heard from earlier today, and some folks at APCD were very helpful to me in understanding where opportunities may lie and what these practices look like in the field. I also was able to talk to a couple folks from Oxy who participated in the panel and had knowledge around, operationally what operators are doing in these areas. So huge thanks to those folks. I am a lawyer by training and don't have a technical background, so it was incredibly helpful to me to talk to them. So the first practice or area to look at was closed loop tankless systems. And for folks who might not be as aware of what that means, to describe it, in older oil and gas locations and in locations where there's not pipeline infrastructure available, you'll have large tanks on location holding the oil that is produced as well as produced water. Those tanks can be significant emission sources themselves. So there's a big emission saving when instead of putting those liquids into tanks, they get taken up from the wellhead and put straight into pipelines. So that's what we're referring to when we say tankless locations. Tankless locations with pipeline connectivity also reduce truck traffic and the emissions related to trucks. So in talking to our partners at APCD, this is a really big area of emission reduction, moving from sort of the old facilities with lots of tanks to tankless or tank light systems. This has been a focus at ECMC and CDPHE for at least as long as I've been associated with the commission. They have been, CDPHE has had this on their consultation BMP list for a long time, and it was something the commission encouraged. And most recently, ever since the cumulative impacts rulemaking, tankless locations are actually required in the front range ozone non-attainment area. So that's the first time we've had a rule requiring that. So the vast majority, I would say, of applications we receive for OGDPs in the front range, which is most of the states. So most of the applications we're seeing these days include piping of liquids instead of tanks, which is a huge improvement. I have learned that there is not much opportunity to expand the use of tankless systems outside of the DJ basin because they're dependent on pipeline infrastructure. You can only go tankless if you have a pipeline to take the liquids instead. And if you go out on the west slope or in some of the less developed operating areas, that pipeline infrastructure might not exist. And then to construct miles and miles of pipelines to get to a location, in many cases, might have more environmental impacts than tanks on a site. So I think this is sort of good news, bad news. The good news is we've made huge strides. The bad news is there's not a lot of additional opportunity that folks are seeing to push this farther. The next operational activity is separator maintenance. And so the emissions source here is when you're going to perform maintenance on a separator, first you have to release the pressure that's inside that separator in order to basically open things up and do your maintenance. That pressure is gas. It's going to contain hydrocarbons, well, reminder that I'm not a technical person. It's going to retain to hold an emission source. And when you open the separator, you could get a plume of emissions. So firstly, I was educated that just adequately and routinely maintaining all of the equipment at the site will reduce the number of times that you're needing to perform separator maintenance, which reduces maintenance activities, or sorry, emissions activities. And secondly, there is a best practice to reduce the emissions that occur during separator maintenance. And that is to, instead of venting that gas to the atmosphere, you route the gas to, or the operator routes the gas either to a tank or another separator, and then it's burned or flared through an emissions control device, which vastly minimizes the amount of emissions. This is required statewide now by APCD's Reg 7. So this is something that all operators in the state are required to do by rule. And when it's done that way, emissions are below regulatory thresholds. The next area is coil tubing mill-out operations. And what this is after hydraulic fracturing, and prior to drilling, there are plugs down in the wellbore that the operator needs to drill out or mill out prior to production. And you need to drill them out of the wellbore. That's what we mean when we say coil tubing mill-out operations. There are sort of two emission sources associated with this practice. One is the non-road engines that power the coil tubing rig, which you do use a rig to drill out these plugs, but it's not on the scale of a drilling rig. I included a little graphic that shows what the rig looks like. It's typically mounted on the back of a truck. And so it's a much smaller machine than the drilling rig. Also, while you do have emissions from those engines, it's only about a day-long process. So I don't think you have the same sort of emissions reduction opportunities as you do from saying you need to use this tier of engine for your drill rig when you might be out there drilling for multiple days as opposed to a one-day event here. There also can be short spikes from braking containment, which is essentially, and my technical folks might be virtually kicking me here, but it's basically when you're taking this thing apart, and you're taking apart the pieces above the blowout preventer here to dismantle and be done with your mill out. When you do that, there is some gas that will be released that can cause a short emission spike, and I believe that's what was observed and commented upon in the studies. There is a best practice available here. I was informed by Oxy to minimize emissions, which is basically instead of just letting that gas go out into the atmosphere, you connect, and I believe you connect to a separator and then flare it through an ECD. So there is that practice available to minimize the emissions. It was not clear to me how, widespread use of that practice is, whether that's something that Oxy is doing and everybody else, or if it's just a smaller subset of operators. The final practice here is emptying sand canisters. And so sand is used in hydraulic fracturing, and then that sand comes back up hole during initial flowback. and it goes into sand canisters, or what catches that sand so that it doesn't go into all the other equipment. Because the sand is coming back up from downhole, it will have some hydrocarbons in it. And so then when you empty the sand canisters and you have all this sand containing hydrocarbons, you can get an emissions plume. So there is um, a current method for emptying sand canisters. Controlled containment sand management is what I'm told it's called, that reduces emissions below the spikes that we're seeing in the studies. And my understanding from talking to my colleagues at CDPHE is that this best practice at one point wasn't as widely followed, and now it is. Now there's much better operator adherence to that best practice. And so we've got fewer emissions. Operators are exploring whether there's better technology available to further minimize those emissions, but there is none currently operational. If the commission was interested in exploring a BMP to require controlled containment sand management systems, that is something that could be considered, I think, on a case-by-case basis if there is a location that warrants that BMP. I have been told that an operator's availability or ability to implement it will depend on what systems and equipment are available to them. So that is my presentation. I am here to answer any questions from the commission, and I will take down my screen.
Questions for commissioners? Commissioner Oath?
Thanks. I'm the first to jump in again. Thanks, Deputy Director Mr. Gelman. I really appreciate your follow-up on this over the past couple of months, and sort of wrapping this up with us this week. I know you've got a lot on your plate as you're wrapping things up. And I don't know that I have questions. I actually have a number of comments and thoughts to share. So first, I appreciate your thoughts on kind of the number of responses that we received in the public comment survey. I agree, and I'm hopeful also that that is a reflection of the value of the conversation and level of engagement that we were able to have with a large group of stakeholders during the informational community meeting. So appreciate all of the comments and questions that we received there, as well as all of the members of the public that took the time to submit comment in writing as well. I did want to call out for everyone's attention that in addition to sort of the categories of public comments that were noted in this presentation, we also received one comment specifically from Dr. Collette, who was a researcher of the second study that the panel evaluated, about just kind of one sentence that was in the report. And I think he was certainly understanding of how the panel had that understanding, but wanted to provide some additional context. And upon review, the panel felt like correction to the report was appropriate. So it had to do with looking at the acute values that were seen at the 3 sites that were studied. And in the initial version of the report, the panel had indicated that we had seen levels above acute values in one case. And actually it was in a number of cases. Now I might get the number wrong. I think it might have been 13. And so wanted to just correct that for the record, and be really clear about that. That said, the sort of takeaway from that, what did not change, which was that those measures were seen above acute levels, kind of close to or were within 1,300 feet of the well pads. But then when they were modeled from sites 1 and 2, those values were well below acute health guideline values at 2,000 feet. And then the researchers were not able to model in the other cases from Site 3 because there were multiple well pads in the area. And so we weren't clear which location they were coming from. So we provided an amended version of the report that was published on Monday just to be fully accurate. Wanted to call that out. And then with respect to some of the other comments and suggestions that came in through this written public comment opportunity, just wanted to share a couple of thoughts on that. One with respect to the research suggestions, those are appreciated. I'm glad we were able to actually have this follow up today at the same time we had the presentation from the Air Quality Enterprise. Appreciate them hanging on and listening for additional interest that we have received from our stakeholders and that we have the opportunity to be proactively engaging in those conversations on future research needs. I appreciate the suggestions that we received. Otherwise, in large respect, fall into categories that either are outside of our authority, as was noted, or are things that are already underway and things that we are diligently working on, or, in my opinion, not supported by the studies. With respect to the BMPs and specific activities, I too had been hopeful that those might provide an opportunity for significant emissions reduction. I suppose I also am fairly pleased that in many cases those are already addressed either through rule or best practice. It sounds like there may be some opportunity with respect to the coil tubing, the sand canisters, and would encourage the technical folks to continue to look at those and see where there are opportunities and in appropriate cases to seek emission reductions from those activities. And I guess overall, I think my one main takeaway for me, anyways, is how important our continued work is to gain an understanding of cumulative impact and how to ground our understanding in kind of scientific research. And so I really appreciate all the work that has been done and certainly look forward to future work in that respect. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Oath. Others with thoughts, comments, questions? Commissioner Messner?
Thanks for the information and presentation, and thanks, Commissioner Oath, for the additional color that you provided. I wanted to make just one comment on the tank piece and the pipeline infrastructure piece, and I think the conclusion that you came up with, Deputy Director. And I continue to struggle with kind of the narrow view of pipeline infrastructure and like this conclusion that continues to happen that the impacts of developing a pipeline are more than having the tanks associated with a particular site or the truck traffic associated with the particular site, because anytime there's tanks, there's inevitably truck traffic that's associated with that. And I wonder if we could dive a little deeper on that and look more comprehensively, because the pipelines that or the pipeline infrastructure that may enable the reduction in tanks may also should also reduce the amount of truck traffic associated with it, which has its own emissions profile and impact profile associated with it. And as we look at multiple sites in a particular area that may be able to gain benefit of having access to that pipeline and therefore eliminating multiple sites that need significant numbers of tanks and significant amount of truck traffic. I think a more comprehensive look on the infrastructure needs and the infrastructure opportunities associated with pipeline infrastructure, rather than just drawing a conclusion that if one site has to put in a pipeline in order to reduce 12 tanks. Therefore, the pipeline infrastructure is more impactful than the tank benefit, but not looking cumulatively or comprehensively at what other benefits may be created by developing that pipeline infrastructure so that we have a clearer picture rather than just looking at it, in one small instance. We're looking at it at a broader scale. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Commissioner Messner. That does make sense, and sounds like something we can definitely look more into. We may need to reach out to our colleagues at CDPHE because some of the emissions questions are probably beyond the expertise of most folks at ECMC, but I can certainly bring this back to staff and see what more we can develop around that question.
Thank you.
Others with questions? Well, I think we all appreciate the presentation. Very good information. And, I think a lot of the things that you spoke to are matters that, as we look at OGDPs on a case-by-case basis, there may be, or there could be potential opportunities for imposition of COAs to cover some of those things based upon our insurance and protection of public health, safety, welfare, and the environment as we look at OGDPs. So appreciate the presentation there. With no further questions, we'll let you move on, and thank you very much again for the presentation today.
Thank you.
And okay. Let's take 5 and then we'll return for our last 2 items. It is 11:32. We'll return at 11:38. All right, we are back, and we are going to hear docket 251000207, oil and gas development plan from Desert Eagle Operating LLC. We should have Mr. McGee and up along with his panel of subject matter experts. AG Bedreau, if you could visualize and you could swear in the witnesses, and we'll get this thing rolling.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Apologies, Mr. Chair. We're a bit behind on getting the witnesses up. I believe we have everyone now. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. I'll ask each of the witnesses to be visualized. When I call your name, please raise your hand, state your first and last name, and swear to tell the truth. Deidre O'Callaghan. I don't see Ms. O'Callaghan here. We'll come back to her. Wesley Marshall.
Wesley Marshall, I do.
You do what?
Promise to tell the truth, the whole truth.
It's just first and last name, swear to tell the truth, please.
Yeah, Wesley Marshall, swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Deidre O'Callaghan.
Deidre O'Callaghan, swear to tell the truth.
Kathy Bolf.
I don't see me. Kathy Ball, I swear to tell the truth.
I can see you. Okay. Graham Beauchart. We'll come back to you. Andrew Payton.
Andrew Payton, swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Borchardt. Probably pronouncing your name wrong. Borchardt?
That's correct. I, Graham Borchardt, promise to tell the truth.
Thank you. Is that I don't see Mr. McKee or Ms. Ardenson here.
Yeah, apologies. It looked like it removed some of us back to attendees after joining as panelists.
It looks like Ryan and Laura were both dropped off.
Hi, Mr. McKee.
Hi, Mr. Bedreau. I'm sorry, I was in and then I was out. I believe that is all of our witnesses.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Mr. McKee, you can present.
All right, thank you. Ms. Aronson, can you start the presentation? All right. Well, good morning, commissioners, ECMC staff, and members of the public. Again, my name is Ryan McKee. I'm a shareholder with Beatty and Wozniak. And with my colleague Laura Aronson, we represent Desert Eagle Operating, LLC, in docket 251000207, which is an application for the approval of the Permian Dome Section 3 Oil and Gas Development Plan. The Permian Dome OGDP is a proposed helium development covering approximately 320 acres that proposes 3 new oil and gas locations with 1 vertical well at each location, all targeting the Lyons Formation and potentially the Precambrian crystalline basement. The OGDP proposes to develop fee mineral lands covered by a single lease, with 100% of the working interest being owned by Desert Eagle. And as will be further discussed, there is no request to space the development lands, as each well will be drilled on a lease basis in compliance with Rule 401B well location requirements. The Permian Dome OGDP is located within Los Animas County, which does not regulate oil and gas siting. Los Animas County does issue an administrative permit, which requires a 14-day administrative review of the Form 2 information provided to ECMC. Desert Eagle has been in consultation with the Los Animas County local government designee regarding this project and is currently engaged with the county to complete the administrative process. Desert Eagle's presentation today, along with the evidence in the record, demonstrates that the Permian Dome OGDP allows for helium development in a manner that avoids, minimizes, and mitigates impacts to the public, environment, and wildlife. A key highlight of the OGDP is the fact that all 3 planned locations are over 1 mile away from any RBUs, HOBUs, and childcare or school facilities and any wildlife receptors. And while the OGDP is within a DI community, which covers most of Los Animas County, because the nearest RBU is over 1 mile away, no additional meetings or consultation requirements were triggered pursuant to the ECMC rules. The Permian Dome OGDP complies with all substantive and procedural requirements of your rules. There were no comments or petitions received against the Permian Dome OGDP. And the director has reviewed all elements of the Permian Dome OGDP and has recommended approval pursuant to Rule 306B1, finding that the Permian Dome OGDP complies with all requirements of the ECMC rules and, in the director's judgment, protects and minimizes from adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. Joining me today to present is Graham Borchardt, a regulatory consultant with Desert Eagle. We will also have a panel of subject matter experts to answer your questions following today's presentation. I will now turn the presentation over to Graham. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. As Ryan mentioned, my name is Graham Borchardt. I'm a regulatory permitting consultant for Desert Eagle Operating. Also on the call today is Deidre O'Callaghan, Andrew Payton, Wesley Marshall, and Kathy Bolf. Desert Eagle is a private limited liability company headquartered in Dallas, Texas. It's a registered operator in good standing in the state of Colorado. Today's presentation covers the Permian Dome Section 3 OGDP presentation, which will include general location information, OGDP procedural background and local government disposition, development plan timeline, cumulative impact mitigations, and employed best management practices, as well as a summary and request for approval. Before talking about the specific Permian Dome Section 3 OGDP, we'd like to start with a brief overview of helium uses and current issues facing the industry. Helium is essential for a variety of applications and is currently in short supply due to international conflicts that have caused damage to plants in the Middle East and Russia. Helium is an essential resource for the manufacturing industry, medical industry, scientific research industry, aerospace industry, and balloons, including heavy lift and surveillance aircraft. The wells that Desert Eagle Operating is drilling in the vicinity, and also including the Permian Dome Section 3 helium wells, consist of relatively shallow vertical wells that require minimal well pad disturbance with a working pad surface of under 5 acres during the production, or half acre during production. These wells are exploratory. Not every well that's drilled is viable for production. The wells are drilled with air, utilizing a water well-sized drill rig over a short approximate week-long window, and generally no drilling fluid is necessary and hydrocarbons are not expected to be encountered. Once and if the well goes into production, the non-combustible helium is conveyed to a processing unit through smaller diameter polyethylene pipeline. Once at the processing unit, the helium is put through a process to separate other non-combustible gases and compressed and loaded onto tube trailers to be transported to market. The Permian Dome Section 3 OGB consists of drilling 3 helium wells. The Desert Eagle's lease covers 100% of mineral interest on 320 gross acres, more or less. The wells will develop fee-owned minerals, and the application lands will be developed on a lease basis pursuant to Rule 401.b. The proposed helium wells will develop the Lyons Formation and potentially the Precambrian crystalline basement. Each location is on private surface, and Desert Eagle has entered into a surface use agreement with that landowner. Each location will provide for the development of a single vertical helium well. During the preliminary planning of this OGDP, the wells were sited at optimal locations in respect to sensitive receptors and other ECMC setbacks. The 3 locations are on rural rangeland. Even though all locations are within a disproportionately impacted community, they've been sited over 1 mile from any residential building unit, high occupancy building unit, school facility, or child care center. Further, all locations and access roads and flow lines have been located outside of CPW high priority habitat and are outside of any ozone non-attainment area. The locations were sited so that there's no immediately down gradient, intermittent streams, perennial streams, or wetlands, and all wells are over 200 feet from the nearest public road or overhead utility lines. The siting locations utilized available data sets as well as an on-site assessment. Alternative location analysis was required and performed on the Permian Dome 0306 location due to being immediately upgraded from an ephemeral, unnamed tributary to the Purgatory River. As you can see in this figure, only one alternate location was assessed during the alternative location analysis for the Permian Dome 0306 location. That's because Desert Eagle was constrained by topography within the lease boundary for siting these wells. Areas that are further away from the ephemeral stream were assessed during preliminary planning and determined to be unsafe to drill due to vehicular access not being able to get there because of the topography. The alternative location would require multiple stream crossings. It also increases the disturbance footprint being located further from other Desert Eagle operating development, leading to fragmentation of habitat. It's also immediately upgrading from the unnamed tributary to the Purgatory River, as all locations assessed were confined to the canyon that the ephemeral stream is located in. This is a photo of the ephemeral stream located immediately downgrading from the Permian Dome 0306 location. As you can see in the photo, this is a thermal stream that only flows after significant precipitation events. As previously discussed, the 3 helium wells consist of a single well on each location that will be conventional vertical helium gas well that will be up to 1,500 feet deep. The wells will be drilled with a water well-sized drill rig utilizing just air. There will be no hydraulic fracturing or stimulation, and produced water and hydrocarbons are not expected. The total disturbance from the 3 locations, their access roads and flow line corridors, will total approximately 3.76 acres. Each of the 3 locations will incur up to 1 acre of disturbance during drilling and completion, and then will be immediately reduced down to 0.4 acre working pad surface, which would include an interim reclamation area of approximately 0.6 acres. Also, as previously stated, these wells will be drilled over a relatively short period, which includes 1 to 2 days for site preparation, 7 days for drilling, 3 days for completion, 3 to 7 days for interim reclamation, and the wells will be in production for approximately 10 years. The working pad surfaces will only have a wellhead and a 6-inch buried helium flow line that will connect to the nearby processing unit. During the preliminary planning and siting of these wells, Desert Eagle kept in mind and was protective of receptors in regards to ECMC regulations. The majority of the Los Angeles County is in a disproportionately impacted community. Therefore, the disproportionately impacted community could not be avoided. However, as previously stated, no RBUs, high occupancy building units, school facilities, child care centers, as well as designated outdoor activity areas are located within 1 mile of any of the proposed locations. CDPHE did not deem the locations necessary for consultation due to a low EnviroScreen score and distance from any of the nearest receptors. Desert Eagle has a surface use agreement in place with the landowner. No public comments were received. No petitions were filed. CDPHE declined consultation and did not have concerns or comments. Due to the location of the Permian Dome 0306 location and proximity to the mapped stream, Desert Eagle was required and granted a consultation waiver to Rule 1202.A3 from CPW. CPW did recommend certain best management practices that include placing a non-permeable liner under all motorized equipment during drilling. Every vehicle on site will be equipped with a spill kit, and aggregate will be stored at the nearby processing unit to contain any potential larger spills or leaks, although unanticipated. Further, the wells will be inspected daily during drilling and completion operations. The relevant government for these wells is Los Angeles County. The county received a 30-day notice and notice of director's completeness determination. Los Angeles County permitting consists of an application fee, location bonding, and a 14-day administrative review of Form 2A information provided to the ECMC. Desert Eagle is in the process of permitting the locations with Los Angeles County currently. Here is a list of some of the highlighted best management practices and avoidance and minimization measures. Some that we'd like to highlight today are, again, the wells will be drilled with air over a short 7-day period. No drilling mud, hydraulic fracturing, proppant, or stimulation is required or proposed. Synthetic liner will be placed under all motorized equipment with a raised edge to prevent any mobilization of unanticipated leaks or spills from mobilizing off the location during drilling or completion. Also, a dust collection unit will be utilized to collect drill cuttings, which will be contained and transported to an improved off-location disposal site in Trinidad, Colorado. This dust collection unit will also help minimize dust. The wells will be drilled during daylight hours, and the locations will be unlit during production. With that, I'd like to thank you for your time and turn the presentation back over to Ryan McKee.
Thank you, Graham. This marks the final slide in Desert Eagle's presentation today and represents an overview of the requested relief for the Permian Dome Section 3 OGDP. Additionally, to close the presentation, I wanted to provide a final overview of the proposed Permian Dome OGDP and some of its key highlights. The Permian Dome OGDP will allow for 320 acres of helium development from 3 locations, with each location requiring less than 1 acre of temporary disturbance, and with each pad being reduced to less than half an acre following interim reclamation. Desert Eagle has committed to installing pipelines for helium gas takeaway at these locations. All 3 of these locations have been sited so that each is greater than 1 mile from any residential or wildlife receptors. The 3 locations are all within an attainment area. And as we stated earlier, no petitions were received against this OGDP and no public comments were made. Lastly, as we previously mentioned, pursuant to the director's recommendation, the Permian Dome OGDP complies with all requirements of the Commission's rules, and in the director's judgments protects and minimizes from adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. We'd also like to thank the staff for its thoughtful technical review of this project and the director's recommendation for approval. And finally, we'd like to thank you, the commissioners, for your attention today to today's presentation. And with that, this will conclude our presentation, and the panel is now available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. We have a panel before us for questions. Do commissioners have questions? Seeing no questions, do we move to deliberations? Do we have a motion?
I'd move for approval of the application.
Second.
Motion and a second for approval. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much, Mr. McGee, to your panel. Thanks to our staff for assisting in getting before us an approvable OGP for this helium project.
Thank you.
We have one more matter before us. As is normal, it takes a few minutes to get everybody up. It's 11:59. Let's return at 12:04. And AG or Hearings Manager Elias, if Thomas, if you could get the witnesses up, that'd be great.
Hello, Mr. Boygan. If you want to test your PowerPoint presentation, you can go ahead and do so.
Okay, good idea. I'm not sure how to get the side eliminated, but I'm not sure that matters. You know, that shows all the slides.
Okay, if you want to share your screen, we can try and troubleshoot.
What do I need to do?
Would you like us to share your PDF version of the slides? There is a share screen option if you go to the bottom of the Zoom screen, and you'll see an
Yeah,
arrow.
that's how I'm. Oh, to me, okay.
Yep.
Sorry, I thought I was doing that, but I was doing it the wrong way. Hold on a second. Got it. So this is what I have. Is that okay?
That is fine. If you want to hit, I'm looking for the button, apologies, on your screen. And I'm looking. If you go up there, you can see slideshow on the menu bar at the top, and then click that.
Yep.
And hit from beginning over there.
Yep, see it. Got it.
There you go. It
I
looks
knew
good.
I knew you would know what to do. Do you have all of my witnesses and co-counsel?
Yes. We're elevating Mr. Bushong right now, and then we'll have everybody in here.
Super. Thank you.
Okay, the full panel is in.
All right, we're back. Promise I'm back. There's my video. We now will take up docket 2604-00126, a general administrative docket. Applicant is Wellington Operating Company, represented by attorney Howard Boygan, seeks to renew its permit necessary to allow the Wellington Production Water Treatment Facility to continue to treat production water from the Wellington Muddy Unit and discharge the treated production water into the Box Elder Creek alluvium in Larimer County. All right, Mr. Boygan, are you with us?
I hope so. Can you see and hear me?
We can hear you. We cannot see you.
Okay. Oh, here we go. Mr. Thomas is coming to my rescue again, as he has already.
Very good. We can see you now.
Great. Nice to see you all. I think I have everybody except possibly one of our witnesses. Is Mr. Gracie on?
Yes, I am.
Oh, great. Okay, I'm not seeing you. Great. So thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Howard Boygan. I am counsel for the applicant in this proceeding, along with my co-counsel, Steve Bouchong, who is also exhibited on your screen. Mr. Bouchong is one of Colorado's preeminent water attorneys and has been involved with this project actually since the beginning in 2006. He was the one who got all the permits for these wells and from the commission for the plant to treat and discharge water in accordance with the procedure that we're here again to review with you today. So he has great experience and expertise in this matter. I am going to run through this presentation, this slideshow, fairly quickly. Essentially, it just covers the information that our witnesses provided to you by their written testimony with their attached exhibits. So I don't want to spend a lot of time repeating what they have already said, but they're available for you to answer your questions. And Mr. Bouchong will also jump in to correct or supplement anything that I might say. So with that, let me start the slideshow. As I indicated, this is a proceeding to renew a permit that was originally issued in 2006 and has been renewed every 5 years since. We're seeking another 5-year renewal. It authorizes the treatment of production water and the discharge of that treated water to the Box Elder Creek alluvium for beneficial use. No objections have been filed to this application. The landowner has consistently supported, and when I say landowner, really the landowner that we're referring to is the one who owns the property on which the rapid infiltration basins are situated. The operator, the applicant here, actually owns the surface where the plant is located. So it's not even clear whether there are any interested parties within the meaning of the rules, but we've kept the landowner apprised, and he's supportive, remains supportive. The director has recommended approval of the application subject to some updating of the permits to reflect current practice. And the WQCD has confirmed compliance with its groundwater protection requirements. Essentially, this facility treats the produced water from wells in the muddy sand unit, discharges that treated water into the alluvium where it's available for beneficial reuse. The plant involves a series of filtration systems which clean the water before it's discharged. The system adds about 2.5 acre-feet per month to the waters of the state. And as Mr. Bouchong will amplify for you, this is a system that's already water short. So this is useful, very useful water added to that system. Over time, since the plant has been operating, we estimate about 611 acre-feet of water have been added to the waters of the state. Over the 20-year history of the plant operation, there was only one exceedance, and that was back in 2006 when the plant was originally permitted, and the issue was swiftly addressed, and there have not been any compliance issues since then. Applicant operates the muddy sand unit and operates this facility, and applicant's affiliate owns the wells in the muddy sand unit. As I mentioned already, this is just a renewal of a permit originally issued in 2005. I'd like Mr. Bouchong to comment here on what procedure they went through when they permitted. They obtained permits from the state engineer and adjudications from the water court to allow this plant to operate.
Good afternoon, Commission. I can jump in real quick. So we initiated a water court proceeding in 2005, and that really set the precedent in order to be able to use non-tributary produced water for beneficial use in the state of Colorado, effectively recycling that water. The water court determined in this instance these aquifers were non-tributary, and the state engineer concurred with that. The water court also determined that the operator or its assigns could put that water to beneficial use, but that the state engineer had to be the one that issued the permits to allow that beneficial use. And so we then proceeded, after we got a final decree from the water court, we obtained well permits for each well in the oil field, allowing that water to be put to beneficial use after it was treated and discharged.
Thank you, Mr. Bouchon. And obviously, we're available for questions throughout this proceeding. If you want to dive into these issues in more detail. Very quickly, on the jurisdiction of the commission obviously has already issued this permit and renewed it several times. What's interesting is that in 2023, the legislation that created the Produced Water Consortium sort of ramped up the concern at both the legislature and this commission for recycling produced water. So this plant, this treatment process was ahead of its time. It anticipated what all of you are laser focused on now, and fits beautifully within your mandate, the mandate of the legislature, to find creative ways to recycle produced water. Your rules carry on that theme and have been updated to create a new procedure for establishing requirements for produced water, recycled water reuse, and a credit system to encourage it. The commission also has entered into a memorandum of understanding with the WQCC, giving this commission the authority to regulate the discharge of produced water into the groundwater in accordance with WQCC regulatory standards. As Mr. Bouchon will comment, there is a separate state statute which governs the beneficial use of that produced water. You may want to comment on that briefly, Mr. Bouchon.
Sure, I will. So the statute is there on the slide, and the key there is that it's non-tributary groundwater. And the reason why I say that's key is because if it was tributary, it would be subject to the prior appropriation doctrine, and that's a whole nother set of issues. But since it's non-tributary, the legislature has the authority to allocate that water, and they did allocate it to an operator who is dewatering a mineral-bearing formation to produce the minerals, and that was deemed to be applicable to oil and gas wells, both by the legislature and later changes to the statute, but also by the state engineer and the water court. So the effect of it is that the state engineer does have the authority to, like I indicated before, issue permits to allow that water to be put to beneficial use.
Thank you. The application itself that we filed meets all of your rule requirements, and it fundamentally satisfies your jurisdictional mandate to protect and minimize adverse impacts to public health, safety, the environment, and wildlife resources by treating the produced water and making it available for beneficial use. The witnesses that we have available, which, by the way, have not been sworn in yet, which is likely my oversight. So I don't know whether Assistant AG wants to do that now or if you want to wait until questions. But we have Randy Evans, who operates the treatment plant, has done so since 2017. He's a certified wastewater treatment specialist. Cameron Gracie is the owner of the operator, and the owner of the oil field, and has actually been operating this oil field since the 1980s. So he is singularly familiar with every aspect of this field. And Mr. Kurt Bowers is available. Subject to, he had some scheduling limitations, but I think he's still on. He is a water broker who has been retained by the operator, the applicant, to assist in marketing the water produced from this plant. The testimony of Mr. Gracie that we pre-filed outlines how integral this plant is to the production operations. It relieves pressure on the injection well, the water disposal wells in the field. The main disposal well is already close to its volume limit. And so having this plant as an alternative alleviates pressure on that disposal well and allows the field to continue to function to its normal limit. The next couple of slides are maps that are in your materials. They were attached to the testimony of Mr. Evans. This first map on slide 12 shows you where the facility is in Larimer County. It's near the town of Wellington. As you can see, it's adjacent to County Road 70. The plant is indicated with that little green pin, and the RIBs into which the plant water, the discharge water is delivered, are shown. They're not so easy to see on this slide, but you'll see it on the next slide. Those are the blue, that's where the blue pin is. I'll move to the next slide, where you can also see not only the plant and the RIBs, but also where the monitoring wells are. There are 6 monitoring wells that monitor the groundwater in the area of the plant. Those are marked, obviously, by the sort of light green pins. 1 is up gradient, 1 is essentially adjacent to the plant, and 4 are down gradient of the plant. This slide kind of, again, puts everything in perspective in Larimer County. You can see how the RIBs are near the treatment facility. The testimony of Mr. Evans outlines how the plant operates. I've got a few slides that run through that. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but of course, we're available for questions. Already indicated, the facility treats produced water from the Wellington Muddy Sand Unit. There are 3 components to the treatment process. The first is the treatment system, then the RIBs, and then the groundwater monitoring wells. The treatment system, these are the components. There's a fine bubble aeration system, a walnut shell infiltration, a secondary aeration system to aid in VOC removal, a granulated activated carbon filtration, and then an RO, a reverse osmosis system, which was also added following the 2021 hearing at the request of Commission staff to reduce waste and prolong the life of the carbon system and to meet discharge permit limits. The plant has a contingency plan, which was attached as Exhibit 7 to Mr. Evans' testimony, which describes emergency response capability. And it also has a materials containment plan, which was Exhibit 8 to his testimony, which describes the spill protection procedure for the materials used or generated or stored on the site. I should also mention that Mr. Evans' testimony included exhibits which contained the discharge data that has been reported to the commission on both an annual and a monthly basis. This slide 20, is a close-in look at the RIBs, where the water is piped and discharged into the alluvium. There is one monitoring well near the RIB, as you can see, monitoring well 050B. The next slide kind of zeroes in on the monitoring wells and how they relate to the RIBs. Outfall 001A is actually at the plant. That measures the outfall of the water from the plant before it goes to the RIBs. There is significant and ongoing groundwater testing to ensure permit compliance. As you've already seen, that's done at the plant outfall and also in the monitoring wells. And the results are tracked and reported to the commission. Exhibit 5 to the testimony of Mr. Evans contains that data. As I've already mentioned, there's only been one exceedance, which was 20 years ago. So the plant has been in compliance ever since. Exhibit 9 to Mr. Evans' testimony is a description, an analysis, which is submitted to the commission annually on the untreated production water that's going into the plant. Environmental benefits to this plant. Primarily, it adds approximately 2.5 acre-feet per month to a water short system. The water can be available for many different kinds of uses. Fracking, aggregate, agricultural, irrigation, municipal, commercial, and augmented beneficial uses. It avoids adverse impacts of trucking, air emissions, noise, and traffic. With respect to the produced water, it reduces stress on disposal wells and avoids shutting in wells in the field if the disposal wells were not able to operate. And I think I already mentioned one of the disposal wells, the key disposal well for this, for the area of the plant, is already near its volume limitation. There are marketing opportunities, and Mr. Gracie and Mr. Bowers can answer your questions about that if you're interested. There is an existing contract making its way through Water Court with a subdivision developer for 30 acre-feet. There are ongoing discussions with an aggregate developer. There are inquiries all the time from local agricultural users, surface owners, and we think there are other opportunities that that can be pursued. So the director recommended approval. WQCD confirmed that the permit, as revised, protects groundwater and complies with its Regulation 41. The application hasn't been contested. The environmental benefits are significant. No adverse environmental impacts that we've identified. So we request approval to what I would describe and what I regard as a visionary approach that anticipated what you're doing now. The emphasis that you are placing on using recycled water. This plant was innovative the only plant of its kind that we're aware of, certainly in that period. It was installed at significant cost and at significant risk by the then owner operator of the field. So it was ahead of its time. And frankly, I have been so impressed by the potential and the vision of this plant that it pulled me out of retirement. I thought I was happily retirement and going down the road until this project kind of pulled me back in, because I believe in it so much, and I believe in what the Produced Water Consortium is doing, and what under the leadership of Commissioner Messner, to look for ways to make produced water a resource of the state rather than a waste product. And so this is a project that I've been proud to be associated with, and I ask respectfully that you approve renewal of the permit. With that, our witnesses are available for questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Boygan, and thank you, Mr. Bouchon, for the presentation. The witnesses have not been sworn in, but I don't know if we've got questions for them or not. So why don't we do this one step at a time? Commissioners, if you have questions for the lawyers, have at it. If you have questions for witnesses, let me know, and I'll get the witness sworn in first, and then we'll answer questions. If you don't have questions, that's fine too. Commissioners, the lawyers are open for questions, and the witnesses are contingently open for questions. Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Boygan, for being here in presentation. Commissioner Boygan, I should say, as him and I were commissioners on the old COGCC at one point in history. So just a couple of questions, just to clarify. While I appreciate in the presentation that you talk about beneficial use and, indicate some potential beneficial uses associated with produced water in general, at least my understanding of the permit as it's being applied for is specific to the use for discharging to the rapid infiltration basins into groundwater. Is that correct? So any other uses besides that aren't contemplated in the permit you're applying for. These are other things that you're contemplating that groundwater ultimately being utilized for, rather than direct use of produced water for those activities.
That's correct.
Yeah. And that's good. And that makes sense. I don't want to confuse things, because there's a lot of literature out there, discussions out there about beneficial use and fit for use and direct use, and whether that's direct use for recycling and hydraulic fracturing operations, or whether it's beneficial use, outside of the oil field, but a direct use of that rather than it being discharged into groundwater and then that groundwater being utilized for some other use. And so this is for produced water being treated, surface discharged into a rapid infiltration basin, and therefore becomes groundwater. And then there's any number of uses for that groundwater after that.
That's correct.
And then just to clarify, one of the we received public comment on this from Ms. Artel, and she asked a question. Have you seen that public comment?
I have.
Okay. There was a question about how it says the rationale document notes that the ECMC director may request additional monitoring at one or more area wells if a violation is detected at just discharge monitoring points. She asks, how will a violation be determined if there are no limitations noted for testing at the monitoring wells? And so I wonder if you would speak to that.
I'm not sure that I understand the question, frankly. Maybe Mr. Bouchon could speak to it. but there is monitoring at the groundwater monitoring wells. I mean, the data is produced every month. So I'm not sure what that question is getting at.
And that's fair. I mean, I'm just trying to be responsive of public comment that we received and questions that were asked in the public comment. So any light that you can shed on that for the benefit of Ms. Artel, who is a regular attendee at our hearings, I think would be helpful.
Let me stop sharing and pull up her comment, see if I can respond more substantively.
And Howard, that may be also a good comment for Randy. Randy Evans, one of our witnesses. Because there is monitoring at the monitoring wells, but I believe the limits are imposed on what is the quality of the water put into the RIBs.
All right, with that, we need to bring up Mr. Boudreau. Mr. Boudreau, if you could swear in Mr. Evans, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Evans, would you please unmute? When I call your name, raise your hand, state your first and last name, and swear to tell the truth. Randy Evans.
Randy Evans, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you.
Mr. Evans, did you hear the question and do you care to comment?
I did, but could it be repeated, please? Just make sure I'm clear.
Well, I'm not sure if it's whether Commissioner Messner or Commissioner Boygan that needs to repeat the question, but somebody does.
I can do that because I've got the comment up on my screen. It says, the rationale document notes that the ECMC director may request additional monitoring of one or more area water wells, if a violation is detected at discharge monitoring points. How will a violation be determined if there are no limitations noted for testing at the monitoring wells? And I guess that's the question, and I'm not sure I understand the question, frankly, but maybe you do, Mr. Evans.
Okay, well, there are limitations or limits listed.
Unfortunately, it appears Mr. Evans is frozen.
Oh, he's frozen. It wasn't just me. That's unfortunate. I will try to get him back. Is he still on the screen?
He's up there, but he's not visual. And he's not talking.
I apologize. I'm not sure what happened.
Randy, if you can hear us, we lost you. You froze, but maybe with you having your camera shut off, that might give you the bandwidth so that we can hear you.
Let me see if I can help here. Ultimately, I think just understanding and being able to answer the questions that Ms. Artel put forward in her comment letter, I think is important to be responsive to the public comment that we received. I've read through the application. I don't have issues associated with the application, but perhaps in lieu of Mr. Evans being here, able to provide a written response. Oh, it looks like Mr. Evans might be back.
I was going to suggest that, Commissioner Messner, that we provide a follow-up response. Her assumption is that there aren't any limitations noted for testing at the monitoring wells, which would mean that you can't determine if there's a violation. That's not my understanding, but I could be wrong.
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened, but I got cut off. But anyway, yes, we do have limits, or at least suggested what we monitor to at the monitoring wells, as well as outfall 001A, which is the water that is discharged by the water plant to the RIBs. And it is our responsibility to report to all reporting agencies or all regulatory agencies if we have an exceedance in those what have been the limits up till now. And we've done that in the past. We do a monthly reporting for the monitoring wells and the outfall 001A when we are discharging. So that is the way it's operated, is just that we do have to do our due diligence and report to be able to maintain our permit. And that, so we do the monitoring and the reporting. And so far, everything has worked out very well for us.
If I might just follow up, her question says, her question assumes that there are no limitations noted for testing at the monitoring wells. How do you interpret that question?
There's some of the results are just noted as being report, and that was what was set up on the permits. And so we do report that data, and the parameters that we have specific limits for, we also report those. So I'm not sure where the comment that there's no limitations has come from, other than the fact that, yeah, some of the monitoring wells, it is just that we are reporting the data, and if it was found to exceed certain limits, then we would be advised by the state, I'm assuming, to do additional monitoring. We did that with some other stuff that was reported in the testimony so far.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Thank you, Mr. Boygan. That answers my question. I appreciate it.
But all right.
Further questions for the panel? All right, seeing no further questions, we move to deliberations. Does anybody desire to initiate deliberations? Commissioner Messner?
Thank you. I'm in support of the permit, the extension. I think that, as Mr. Boygan indicated, this is a good example of what is possible with the proper treatment, testing, monitoring of produced water. I think there's lots of opportunities for reuse and recycling of produced water infield. I think there's opportunities for further exploration of beneficial use outside of the oil field. I think it's important to note on this one that it is in fact a surface discharge into groundwater, and the category that they're utilizing beneficial use in is in a water rights standpoint versus an actual beneficial use of produced water in a direct application. Although by augmenting that groundwater, it does create additional volume of water for other beneficial uses, and so I acknowledge that. I think they have shown a track record of compliance, and a track record of continually updating and improving their treatment mechanisms. And so would be supportive, and I'm happy to make a motion of approval of the application.
Very good, thank you. I consider that a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Is there further deliberation on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Boygan and Mr. Bouchon. Appreciate you presenting on behalf of your client before ECMC today.
Thank you, commissioners. We appreciate your hearing us.
Thank you.
All right. Any further agenda items? I'm not seeing any. With that, I would move to adjourn for the day.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks.